Greetings, my name is Slight, and welcome to the Vanessa Actually Useful Tier List. If you are looking for nothing more than an actually useful tier list that you can use to play the game, to improve the way that you're going to play, to improve your outcomes, look no further than what's on the left side of the screen. There's also a link in the description that will take you directly to this. Here's what you need to know if you want to use this immediately, all right? This is ranked top to bottom, left to right. The topmost items are always good. They're pretty much something you can pick up in every single build for Vanessa. Stuff that's usually good, obviously, is things that are usually good. They're not going to fit in every build, but they tend to fit at some point in the run in every single build that you might do. You know, I can throw in a dock lines, I can throw in a sextant, I can throw in a simple syrup, I can find a place for these slow duration increases. I can often find that. The next is Situationally OP. These are, we'll go through this entire list here as to why each of these is situationally OP. If you look down, I have timestamps out for when I go through each section of this tier list. So if you're really looking to just understand in what situation each of these things are very powerful, you can go and jump to that section. But these aren't auto-includes. They're not something you can necessarily fit into every build, but when they find their niche, they are extremely powerful. Then we move into probably the meat of this tier list, which is 4 builds. Now, note that I've ranked these top to bottom in how powerful I think these builds are. I still think one weapon build is probably the best way to play Vanessa. So many ways to do that. Then ammo, aquatic, and the slow build. Note, there are other builds, okay? This is meant for players who are newer to the game, who are struggling to get their wins, who are trying to play Vanessa, and they're just not sure exactly what to pick and when to pick those things. That's what this is for. We hone in on 4 builds here as opposed to trying to grab the entire nuanced range of the entire spectrum of builds. And by doing that, we actually have something that's practical and useful. So once you go through the builds, you're eventually kind of going to solidify on one of these, or at least something in this range. Basically, these show you left to right the most critical items for each of these builds. So you'll notice for the one weapon, the silencer build is higher than every single weapon. It's higher than Crow's Nest because this is really the main enabler for a one weapon build. Like jellyfish here for the aquatic build, this thing is that thing that triggers a bunch of haste triggers. It's critical. Ramrod keeps 2 weapons healthy and with plenty of ammo while adding crit chance to everything. Yada, 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 on and on. So then we've got nothing better and the avoid categories. Now, obviously, there are some weapons that are really strong, some items that are really strong, but they just don't quite fit into my 4 builds. They're not usually good or always good. They're not really situationally OP, and that doesn't mean they're bad, and it doesn't mean I don't use them. For example, you know, Shark Ray right down here is pretty far down this aquatic build, but I just went 10 wins with an aquatic build that used Shark Ray, right? So these don't say never pick. These say nothing better and generally avoid, okay? It is rare that the things in this avoid category are going to be useful for you. It doesn't mean you should never take them. It just means that they tend not to be very strong. So all that being said, that will get you able to use this tier list. Go on your merry journey. If you have questions, throw them down below. I'm really good at answering those. If you have suggestions on how to improve this, then please throw those down below, and I will just iterate on this as Vanessa gets updates. She's definitely my most played character. I went legend with her in the first ranked season, and I haven't played enough to get to legend yet because it just takes a long time, but I've got a good win rate, so I'll eventually get to legend again. All that being said, the way that I go through my tier lists is I start bottom to top. I really like going at the bottom because this gives the context for why these weapons fail and why the items above here are actually successful. So I will timestamp all these out based on their category, and I'm going to start with our boy Pesky Pete. So Pesky Pete I've put as the very worst, the most avoid item in the entire set of Vanessa, and the reason is Pesky Pete has a long cooldown, he's got a relatively low burn amount, and he's got conditions that require him to gain extra burn. So even in the best case scenario, do I want an item that I can only get at gold. So the earliest I could ever get this is day 5. So I won't be able to like add any cinders to it. I won't be able to improve it in any way until I get it, which is going to be difficult to get until it's later in the game. I have to have either 2 friends or 2 properties adjacent to it. And even if I meet that rather difficult condition, I am only going to get 8 times 2 plus 6 is, math, 22 burn on a 7-second cooldown. That's terrible. It's really not enough. And none of these enchantments really make it any better. None of these are like bespoke, unique enchantments that would make Pesky Pete worth it. And therefore, he is at the very bottom of our list. Next up is Cannonade. Cannonade has some of the similar problems that Pesky Pete does. Namely, it's a high cooldown item. You can only get it at gold, so you can't really improve it until you get it. At baseline, you need a lot of weapons to use this, but then it takes up 3 slots, and it does not output damage that warrants the 3 slots it takes up. You know, maybe if it's self-charged, this would have something where eventually it would be good. It's also a build-around item that doesn't have any unique build-around enchantments. You know, this could easily move up into situationally OP if this had enchantments that actually synergize with the builds you would build it around. But as it stands, it's totally not worth it. Next up, we've got Diving Helmet here. Diving Helmet is huge pay-to-win vibes here. Actually, a relatively interesting item from the new, what do you call it? What's the name of this pack? Yes, it's called the Mysteries of the Deep pack. So Diving Helmet is one of the items in here. It's bad. It has a 6-second cooldown. It shields for a small amount. But the unique thing it does is has adjacent items are aquatic. You know, it has some kind of bespoke things here with like the deadly adjacent aquatic items have plus 25% crit chance. You know, that's relatively unique. But other than that, it doesn't have anything that's super special. The unique thing about this item is that when you buy an item, if it slots next to the Diving Helmet, this might be patched out notably, but it becomes aquatic and then counts as if you purchased an aquatic item. So that's kind of unique. You could kind of combine that here with the coral armor. That being said, that doesn't make it good, and you should generally avoid it. Next up on the list is Spyglass. Spyglass is a relatively cool item. It has a unique effect. At the start of each fight, an enemy item has its cooldown increased by 6 seconds, and it gives you crit chance. The reason that this one fails to make the cut is that its enchantments are not very good. I mean, Heavy's pretty good, Icy's pretty good, so okay, its enchantments are actually pretty decent now that I think about it. You know, these 5 here are like fine. The shiny and the deadly are the same, which is unique. But the big thing here is that this item fails to really impact first item usages. So you might think, oh, well, if someone's got like a couple big weapons that are kind of slow, well, I'll increase their cooldowns and then they won't be good anymore. And it's like, yes, that's a good idea. But if they kill you in one hit, Spyglass does nothing because the first time it triggers, when it's added that cooldown to the item starts as if it's like basically charged by the amount that its cooldown was increased. So if it's a 2-second item that you increase to 8 seconds, that first trigger's still going to be 2 seconds. And so that really affects this item's ability to be effective. I don't know how that should be changed, but in general, there's just a lot better items that give adjacency to crit. You know, there's a case that this can go into the nothing better, but I think that most people are going to be better off by just avoiding the spy class. All right, next up we have Rifle. Rifle is a fine item. It is just a worse katana, pretty much in every way. It can't be used with other items. Sometimes you can use this in the first couple days if you have a skill that lets you do some damage. But beyond that, this should get off your board relatively quickly. Katana's not good. There's so many better items to use in a one weapon build, and Rifle does not justify the limitations that it imposes based on its like reload requirements. And it doesn't do anything special as far as its enchantments, so skip it. Next up is Butterfly Swords. Butterfly Swords is honestly maybe in the nothing better category, but you know, I just really don't think it quite is quite good enough. It's a good thing to call out that it's not quite good enough, right? The big thing here is that you kind of need it to be at diamond tier before you start really getting value, because then it's a small item with a 2-second cooldown, right? But that is a high requirement to get. It does not do much base damage. It needs a lot of help. It doesn't have any special enchantments. It will pretty much always take a long time before it goes off the first time. And that just tends not to be very worth it. This has a place in like spam weapons, but it doesn't have a place with any of the builds that I've put on this list. And so for that reason, we're avoiding it. Next up is Narwhal. Narwhal has similar problems. Really, for the damage that you get, for the cost of 5 seconds cooldown, you get so very little. It is nice that it's a small item. It is nice that it has the aquatic tag, but none of that makes up for the weak stats on this item and the fact that it really doesn't have an identity with anything that currently exists in Vanessa's kit. Next up, we've got Jit. Jit's a cool item. I wish this was better. The big problem with Jit is, and I think it's close to being playable, and you know, there's some case to be made that Jit can make its way as like the last pick here in the slow build, so I didn't consider that, but there's a thought there. The big problem with Jit is that it scales very slowly, considering the fact that you have to be triggering a lot of slows to get the benefit from this. It just gains damage too slowly to be valuable. This is one of those items that I think in a future patch will probably get some love and get these numbers tuned where it's a little better earlier and then doesn't have this sort of doubling scaling effect. And maybe that will actually help it be a little bit better. But for now, it doesn't do anything special. There are other things you'd want to put in the slow build, and it just doesn't give you enough payoff for all the slows that you trigger. So, yep, skip it. Next up, we've got Fishing Net. Fishing Net is bad because piranhas aren't very good, right? We do have some piranhas at the very bottom of Nothing Better. They did get some buffs recently. This, at 9 seconds, slowing 4 items for 3 seconds is pretty good, all right? That is not terrible. The problem is it comes out very late. 9 seconds is a long time to wait. You know, if this was 7 seconds, maybe we could start talking, you know, and then you could do like fishing nets plus dock lines, right? But right now, fishing nets and like items like shovel as well to some degree, some of these generation items, they have a hard time paying off. And especially if you're not getting something valuable, and a piranha is just not valuable enough. You know, if this gave you something other than piranhas every once in a while, like maybe it pulled a yeti crab or an elusiray, you know, something like that, or even seaweed, that would be funny. You know, if this had like a smaller subset of items that it pulled back besides just piranha, maybe we would see this bump up, because we definitely do see the fishing rod up here. Just fishing nets gives us piranhas, and we don't want piranhas. Next up, we have a controversial one, undeniably, is Iceberg. I definitely feel confident about my choice putting it down here in the avoid category, not because Iceberg is bad, but because Iceberg is difficult to fit into builds correctly. It's a very niche item. Really, it's similar to add 1 second cooldown to every, like it's similar to Bonk, right? But it takes up 3 slots. You really need to get freeze synergy off of this, or you need to really increase the freeze duration. And Snowflake just recently got nerfed so that the Snowflake loot item only adds 0.5 second freeze duration instead of 1 second freeze duration. So that makes this even worse, because it's even more difficult to scale this up, even when you do get lucky enough to get that Snowflake. Right now, there's just not enough freeze synergy to make Iceberg worth it on average. While a experienced player may learn how to get good usage out of this, I will tend to say if you're trying to just follow this tier list, this is one to avoid. This is going to be a difficult one for you to get value out of. That being said, it does have some cool effects, some cool enchantments. But like it has Radiant, which is absolutely terrible. Anyway, I think you get the point. Next up, we have Lockbox. Lockbox is an item I've wanted to love for a long time. And I think even just bumping this to like 3 or even 4 value when you win a fight will make this an extremely strong item. This item has really cool enchantments, and it just isn't quite good enough. It's very difficult to scale. And you do get it early enough, like it's silver, right? I could see this also being very valuable if you got it at bronze. If you were able to get this at bronze, that would be a big improvement to this item. It's at the top of the avoid. I will say, don't get baited by this item, okay? I really have not seen this be a good payoff. It's very win more, and then you're spending a lot of money while you're winning more, and you're not extending your advantage very well, because putting this on your board is a joke. It is not nearly enough damage with its current scaling values. That might change. We do have truffles as a general loot item, which will allow you to add value to items more easily. So we could see Lockbox coming up with very little needed, but right now you're not going to get much value out of it. It used to do things like freeze, haste, and slow at the beginning of the fight with its previous iterations of enchantments, and now it's when you fall below half health, which is a much worse condition. As an aside, I'd like to see a lot of these below half health change to like below 66% health, or like below 2/3 health. I think that would improve these enchantments a lot more. Oftentimes when you get to half health, you can just be dead, because that's just kind of the way that the game tends to work out. So Lockbox, good one to avoid. What have they done to our boy Astrolabe? Used to be one of the best items in the game, undeniably. And it does have some cool enchantments, like Deadly here is a pretty powerful enchantment. But a lot of these other ones are really terrible, especially for what it does. It's just not hasting enough things. This used to work when anytime you use a non-weapon, it would haste that item. Any non-weapon would get hasted. And now it's sort of got this charge mechanic built in, but it really doesn't haste enough for you to use it. So this used to be the cornerstone of the Aquatic build, and now it is bad. So skip it. It can work for you as a holdover if you have nothing else. You can throw it on a board, an Aquatic board, to get some haste if you've got enough non-weapons, but you're going to be looking to get rid of this pretty much as soon as possible. All right, we are now in the nothing better category. At the bottom, we've got the Piranha, the humble Piranha. Piranha is not terrible. It is almost terrible, though. It doesn't do much damage, but one thing I'd like, to compare you to is this has a 20% crit, the same damage as a Narwhal, and it has an incredibly powerful passive, which doubles its crit damage. It's an Aquatic, you get it at bronze. And this is why Narwhal's in Avoid and Piranha's in Nothing Better. It is pretty much just a strict improvement over the Narwhal. Sure, you pay 1 second of cooldown, but for what you get a lot of improvement. Yes, you very, very much do. And there's really nothing more to say about Piranhas. I will say that I've had quite a few runs where, like, you'll see that Chum is rated much higher. I've got Chum up here. And I think Chum's actually quite good. I think Chum's pretty well positioned. And it gives you a Piranha, but then that Piranha's only good because you have Chum, right? So I find myself throwing a Piranha into the mix every once in a while, and I don't feel too bad about it. And so I think you can find a way on your board if temporarily. What have they done to our boy Katana? He's been bonked and not really helped out after being bonked. Katana used to be a 2-second cooldown weapon, and that was its claim to fame, along with the rifle here. But it was moved to 3 seconds, which disproportionately negatively impacted items like Katana and rifle, because they had a essentially 50% reduction in power level, whereas something with 8 seconds that went to 9 seconds had a 1/8 reduction in power level, as opposed to a 1/2. So one of the reasons Katana is so low is because of the most recent patch, which pretty much increased every single item's cooldown by 1, and that disproportionately affected items like Katana. We might see this. We've seen Uzi go back to 2 seconds. We may see this item also go back to 2 seconds, and if it does, then it will actually have a place back in the one weapon build. But until then, it's just fine. It's a holdover item. but we really want to see other things on our board for our weapons and our one weapon build. Next up is Grappling Hook. So Grappling Hook did get buffed relatively recently. It has quite a long slow duration, which is a big help. Even at bronze, it's slowing for a significant duration. It's decent damage, nothing to be excited about. I think that sums it up. Nothing to be excited about here. It is actually accomplishing something, as opposed to JIT, in my opinion, just because it has a decent cooldown. The fact that this is up here and JIT's down here is a little arbitrary. One thing to take away is both of these items are not very good. And Bolus down here is also not very good. We have like this kind of weird slow weapon package that's just slow and not very powerful, and doesn't fit into any of the slow combos. And part of that's just because JIT doesn't have a big payoff for those situations. If JIT gets stronger, these items just naturally get stronger because they will be doing similar things that JIT does, which means any skills that benefit JIT will also benefit Grappling Hook here and Bolus, and maybe even this Manta Shrimp here. But then JIT will actually be what recoups all of the cost of putting this mediocre item on your board. It's fine, not exciting. Next up is Ice Pick. Ice Pick is something that just got buffed. It has quite a bit of damage, which is a good sign. This is getting close to being something that could start being a payoff with Iceberg. There's something out there potentially with like Iceberg, Ice Pick, Primordial, I forget the name, like Primordial Depth Charge, and Yeti. Maybe there's a build out there for these three items together. Haven't seen it yet. But I could see that. I think Ice Pick's pretty well positioned. It just doesn't have a lot of synergy yet. It's real close to being situationally strong or having a build. I think it's out there. Maybe you get a freeze enchant. Maybe you get a lucky item from another class. You could probably make Ice Pick work. 36 damage, 60 damage starting. This is just, like 6 damage per second at silver is not terrible. Along with freezing and self-scaling, it's not bad. I tend to be pretty happy with it, and it's nice to be able to see something this low on the tier list already saying, me being able to say like, it's not trash, it's not utter trash, it's just there's better things to be doing. Next up is Coral Armor. Coral Armor is an item I've really wanted to be able to work because you could do like a Coral Armor plus Crusher Claw build, and Crusher Claw, because I don't have it pulled it up, is the neutral item that will deal damage equal to the highest shield value item you have. It's a neutral item. So that's something I've always wanted to get to work, but the 6-second cooldown and the slow scaling of this tends to be pretty difficult. You have to buy another aquatic item, which is really costly. Items like Silk gain a similar amount of shield when you sell a non-weapon item, which is a bajillion times easier. Literally, it is a bajillion times easier than buying aquatic items. So this item's never going to be good until it can scale better. And right now, the current scaling is just far too weak for it to be useful. I would love to see this item get buffed because I think this always looked to me like a keystone Vanessa item along with the Vanessa amulet, but it's always been a little terrible. And by terrible, I mean difficult to scale. Just not worth the payoff that you have to input for it. That being said, I will say, if you can get this early, it can be pretty good like days 2, 3, 4, 5. But you tend to have to shift away because it doesn't scale enough into the late game. Because everything gets so expensive, you can't just keep buying aquatic items, and Vanessa tends not to be able to facilitate that kind of money-making engine. Next up, we've got Bayonet. Bayonet is a fine item. The big problem with Bayonet is doesn't work in one-weapon builds, so it's very hard to fit in like the best version of weapon builds. That being said, one build that's not on this list that you can absolutely do is just fill your board with small and medium weapons with enough ammo synergy, and that is a perfectly viable build. I just didn't put it on here because, you know, you can just try that at any time. And Bayonet actually works quite well in that. I think Bayonet's enchantments really stand up for it quite well. You know, like the icy, turbo, and heavy enchants are essentially tied to how quickly the item it's attached to is, and so that can actually be quite strong. I think Bayonet is decent, but tends to fall off, tends not to be very strong, and tends not to be worth it. You know, I've put Bayonet on my board with like a ballista, and that was I've seen that be very strong. Like you can put heavy Bayonet, and then when your ballista fires off, it just slows their whole board. Or even if you get lucky with an icy or turbo, you know, those tend to be pretty good. So yep, it's fine. It's not good enough. It doesn't fit into any of these builds very well. Doesn't really fit into the ammo build, so it's down here, nothing better. Next up we have Shoeblade. Shoeblade is a fine early game item, but after that it's too slow for the damage that it gives you. It is a unique item in that it scales up crit chance in a way that most items do not. And so like I've seen like a silver Shoeblade actually perform pretty well on days like 1, 2, and 3. But, you know, 7 seconds for 80 damage at 100% crit chance. So, you know, 160 damage every 7 seconds. It's fine, but it lacks synergy, and it's too slow. You know, seeing this at 5 seconds, it would be very strong item. But at 7 seconds, it's just a little underpowered and doesn't work in any build. But, you know, one of the things that I miss from the lore about Shoeblade here is that it seems like an auxiliary weapon, but then has no synergy with you having other weapons. It's just like kind of a strong attacking small weapon, and that turns out not to be good enough. Next up is a very sad item, the Pop Snappers. Pop Snappers used to be a 3-second cooldown, and I really think it needs that to be useful. Has nothing worthwhile for enchantments. Only 3 ammo. It has a decent amount of burn, and Vanessa really can't do a lot of burn unless she gets skills. You'll see up here we have Lighter and Volcanic Vents and Weather Glass all up here in the Situationally OP. A lot of that situational, you know, necessity is what skills do you have, man? Because if you've got a Lighter without a skill to add more burn to it, you have one of the worst items in the game. But if you add 6 burn to that, or 7 burn to that Lighter, it becomes so good, like a very strong item. And so that sort of what is the word I'm looking for? The binary nature of you having or not having those skills is what makes items like Pop Snapper and the current like burn package that Vanessa has kind of weird and not too strong. Another thing is that a lot of the burn, like her classic burn stuff, doesn't have much synergy with her slow build, which is one of the ways that she really capitalizes and tends to do a lot of burn damage. So the fact that they're a little anti-synergistic or non-synergistic means that they don't see too much play. Next up is Coral. Coral is a fine item. Ooh, I've been talking a lot and my voice cracked. It was better when it was a 4-second item, obviously. 5 seconds is a long time to wait for a mediocre payoff. This does not scale quickly. Healing 20, and then a very costly requirement to scale very slowly. We've seen this before, haven't we, with the Coral Armor? The big difference here is that Coral is 5 seconds. It does something. It's a small item, meaning that it is an aquatic trigger, and sometimes you just need aquatic items on the board for things like Seashell and Primordial Depth Charge and Pearl here. So Coral is better positioned than Coral Armor. Next up, we've got Blowgun. Blowgun's a cool item. And you know what? I did forget that they made this change where when it goes to Diamond, its cooldown gets reduced a lot. So this might actually be situationally OP. And one thing is, I can change this as we go forward in time, you know. This is a snapshot of my understanding of the game, and I have like 300 plus runs on Vanessa, right? So I'm not a god tier, but I think I know pretty good what makes Vanessa tick. And I could see blowgun getting better. The big problem here is it only shows up at gold. It's a small item. Its enchantments are fine, but nothing special. It could have a lot of payoff, but just waiting for this to go off the first time, you really need a way to increase its damage. So it's very contingent on you, like Flamethrower is. Like, you need a way to bolster this thing's damage, and if you don't have it, you just can't use the item. So with all of its limitations, I could see this being valuable and like having a place by abusing cooldown reduction. Let's say you reduce the cooldown at when it's at gold by 12%, that gets you to around like 7.9, and you've reduced it by 1.1 seconds. And then when you upgrade it, now it is a 5.9 second cooldown. I mean, you're getting toward, but it needs a lot of love. It needs a lot of setup. So I feel pretty comfortable where it's at right now. I could see this changing if there's ever a way for Vanessa to get really easy added damage. Like right now we've got Honing Steel, but Honing Steel does not scale well. And so it's really difficult to just throw Honing Steel on a blowgun and think that that's going to solve your problems. One thing I'd like to see is maybe this 7 seconds at all levels, and then just, give it 50 damage when it goes to diamond. I could see that being cool. But for now, something to avoid. Or rather, something to only play with a little bit if it fits in your build. It'll work fine. It's a small price for a potentially powerful payoff. Next up, we've got Concealed Dagger. Concealed Dagger can sometimes be worthwhile to put on your board. It is a very slow weapon at 9 seconds with very little damage, but its main payoff is that it does give crit. Not crit, it gives gold. One thing to note, and the reason I misspoke there, is that when you crit with this item, it crits on the gold gain. So when you crit with it, instead of gaining 3 gold, you gain 6 gold. So this can be a nice item to throw in when you're doing like a mass weapon strategy with a decent amount of crit. You can just throw it in when you're fighting a monster. And if it goes off twice and you crit once and it's a gold item, you're getting 6 gold just for fielding the item, and that's pretty darn good. That's hard to beat. That being said, it's definitely not critical to any build, and it requires you to kind of shuffle around stuff, and it's not very inspiring, all things considered. I do like the item, but only worthwhile if you're really looking to try to extend that monetary advantage. Next up, we have one of my favorite items, Blunderbuss. Blunderbuss does have its moments where it really can shine. Maybe this doesn't deserve to be a nothing better, but it does need a lot of love, for it to actually be strong. You're looking for the incendiary rounds. You're looking for burning ammo skill, which is a skill that whenever you use an ammo weapon, you burn 2. That stuff really activates Blunderbuss, and you really need it for Blunderbuss to be effective. And then it's 100 damage with a 5-second cooldown, used to be 4 seconds, and a 2-second charge, which means you need 3 burn triggers to make it pay off. And if it itself is a burn trigger, you can get to where this is doing a lot, but now that it's a 5-second instead of a 4-second weapon, it's much more difficult to get this to where you're getting good use out of it every single time. You need to get this to 4.4 second cooldown. It just means you need a lot for this to work. When it works, it's great, but it doesn't work very often. Next up here is Bolus. Bolus is an item that I find I put on my board relatively often. It has a nice cooldown, does decent damage and a decent amount of slow. Its main limitation is that it only has 2 ammo, but it is a nice small item here. Nothing special as far as the enchants go. It's fine. It's a holdover item. It's never something I would stick next to, my Ramrod in my ammo builds. You can make a case that this is essentially like nothing better for ammo builds. Maybe this should be at the very tail end of the ammo build, just so I have some ammo item to throw. Kind of the same way here with Nesting Doll. But that being said, I think that works. Like, these are the real items that you're looking for the ammo build. And obviously you can slot all these other ammo items in as necessary. I think, if I could redo this real quick, I'd probably throw Bolus up here, a little further forward. I think he got scooted a little too far down. He's fine. Nothing special. And sometimes that's what we need on our board. Next up is Musket. Musket's a cool item. Kind of similar into this sort of blunderbuss, fire plus ammo like combo that's kind of out there. That's not like fully realized, but every once in a while you get it to work and it works great. I've done a couple like one weapon musket builds that actually worked quite well. The nice thing about one weapon musket is you don't need the crit. So really you can like full focus on cooldown reduction. You can get like a thruster and a star chart, and then you can throw your silencer over to the right, and then you can get like a 2-point-something second musket that's got a 100% crit chance, and then you just need some burn so that it reloads. And if it gets fiery, then it reloads itself, right? It's fine. Needs a lot for it to be good, and there's just better things to be doing. That being said, I've gotten 10 wins with musket before. It just doesn't fit really into the builds that we're doing. But, there's a chance for it to make your dreams come true. Oh, how far our boy has fallen. The Trebuchet, which used to be, and still has some potential to be one of the best items in the game, doesn't really fit into anything that we're currently doing. But there are builds which use Trebuchet, right? This is essentially another haste payoff. You'll see in the Aquatic build, we've got quite a few things that are essentially haste payoffs. Excuse me, I meant to click that one. But this one just isn't quite enough. It doesn't do quite enough damage. It has a little too high of a cooldown. The big thing is it doesn't burn enough. I think like if this burn was increased significantly, like doubled, we would see Trebuchet come back. But along with stuff like lighter, vents, Trebuchet, pop snappers, this sort of like vanilla-y burn mechanic that Vanessa has just doesn't have enough support without getting a lucky skill. Trebuchet is an item that I could easily see in the right position going 10 wins with, and you'll notice that the item quality is already starting to get quite strong here, or at least like not trash. It's just not good enough, and there are better things to be doing with your energy than trying to force Trebuchet. You can make it work, but it's going to be tough. Cannon fits right in line with this kind of situation. It's another one of these sort of burn items. It does decent damage. Now, this used to do 200 or 250 damage at Diamond, and back then, Cannon was actually pretty good. Right now, for 5 seconds, for 2 ammo, for this little measly burn amount, this just doesn't do enough. This does have some really good enchants, which I like. It has very high value enchants. See how these are 6 seconds? I think that's pretty cool. I'd like to see some stuff like that and more of them. That means like with a little bit of love, this item could see more play. But as it stands right now, it's too slow. It's not enough damage. And if the only reason I'm using this is for it's an icy enchant, well, that's great. And then I'll use it once it has an icy enchant. Oh, how our boy has fallen. Nesting Doll, probably one of my favorite Vanessa items. At 2 seconds, really cool item, not overpowered in my opinion, and a really useful utility item. At 3 seconds, it's a little too slow. The main idea with Nesting Doll, it's a very fast activating item that is significantly limited by its ammo. It's something that you need to think about because you can buy one early, let it gain ammo at the start of each day, and you can put basically like every shield upgrade opportunity you get on it. And you can cruise into the late game and this can be shielding for 250 shield on a 2-second cooldown. That was what it used to do. At 3 seconds, this is another one of these items that's been disproportionately negatively impacted by the Great Bonkening. And for that reason, it's pretty low on the list. And it's sad to see it because this was one of my favorite items. But I suspect and I trust in our Lord, Reynad, to give Nesting Doll the love that it deserves. Next up is Shark Claw. Shark Claw is a pretty good item. Definitely can make its way in to a mass weapons build. Definitely has a place there. Its enchantments are pretty weak. It does have some unique stuff here, like your burn items gain +3 burn, your poison items gain +3 poison, your heal items gain. So it's got some like kind of bespoke enchantments. That being said, none of those are quite enough to really make this super jive. You know, I could see like a shielded one doing something special, but on the whole, at 5-second cooldown, you know, this is 25% worse than it used to be, and it was already on the cusp of kind of being mediocre. So it does have the aquatic tag, and an aquatic weapon, there aren't a lot of those. So we may see that that really becomes the thing that makes this a super valuable item once it eventually gets there. But as it stands, it's just not quite good enough to put with anything else. The only place this has, in my opinion, is like just mass weapons. And this is a pretty good one in that case. Next up is Disguise. Disguise is a unique item in the sense that I say that it's at the top of Nothing Better, because you can buy Disguise, and basically, if you have enough room on your board, you have a pretty good chance of getting, you know, you can get a medium or large item, which means that overall this either breaks even or gives you money just for buying it. But it allows you to see kind of like one item deeper, and it will let you see whatever, it'll let you see an item at the rarity this is for usually a very low cost. And it's a non-Vanessa item guaranteed. Another thing is that this does have some unique enchantments. The enchantments for this can be relatively good, like the heavy icy turbo. Those ones can be kind of interesting. The rest of them are quite mediocre, but you know, this one's one to kind of watch out for. If these enchantments get an update where they're not shielding such a low amount or burning or toxicking at such a low amount, you could see this being pretty good. The passive here, as far as giving items from other heroes a crit chance, very rarely useful. I've only seen Disguise on one person's board in hundreds and hundreds of games. And that was a lucky run where I had a bunch of stuff from other heroes that could benefit from crit. But the big reason that this is at near the top of Nothing Better is because you can tend to buy this and get to see one more item that's usually on average either going to just cost you like a small amount of gold comparatively to the actual money you spent to look. Next up is Torpedo. Torpedo's very close. You'll notice that these are good items. Torpedo's not a bad item. There's a case to be made that it's in Situationally OP. There's a case to be made that it goes in ammo. There's a case to be made it goes in aquatic. The problem is, it's just not quite good enough. Just barely. You know, I think that this could have a place, you know, maybe with a shipwreck and aquatic build. This is a holdover item. You know, this is an item that tends to have a hard time making it all the way through a run, but it is a decent payoff for aquatic and ammo builds when you really need something to just kind of scale up damage. This can really do pretty well at that. It scales pretty nicely even at gold and silver. It does have some ability to reload itself. It's pretty good with shipwreck, pretty good with crow's nest. Excuse me. No, it's not good with crow's nest. Ignore that. Pretty good with stuff like submarine or port. But it's just not quite there yet. The cooldown is one of the biggest things. You could see Torpedo being very OP if its cooldown is lowered too much, or if it gets another ammo. I could see Torpedo being really strong. As of now, it has a little niche where it fits. It needs a little love to make work. But you know, in a lot of cases, the fact that it has a high cooldown allows it to be used at the silver and gold tier, because then I can just do a bunch of aquatic stuff, do a bunch of ammo stuff, scale this up so that it kills them, right? That's the goal, is that by the time this fires, after 9 seconds, it just kills them. So there's a place for this, and it's kind of just not quite good enough to include in these builds. A potentially contentious choice is Submarine at the very top of Nothing Better. I really think this is a well-positioned spot for Submarine. You know, it is pretty rare that I want to play Submarine. I'm always usually looking for something better. You know, like Cutlass's conditioning, the multicast from Flagship. You know, you can get aquatic triggers here, and you can do a little damage. The big thing here is Submarine needs a lot of help It was disproportionately impacted by the Great Bonkening. It's been reduced in its power by 33% because this used to be a 3-second item, and going to 4-second with no changes to its other bases means that it's pretty heavily impacted by that. You know, you can see one weapon builds with submarine. I'm sure that player is either trying something new or would have preferred one of these other items, but they didn't. They got submarine. They had nothing better, and they chose to build this up. One of the best items with submarine is Swashbuckle, because Swashbuckle double dips on the crit chance it gives with submarine, not only improving its damage, because when you improve the damage, it improves the shield of the submarine, but then also improving the shield based on the crit chance from Swashbuckle. So I see Swashbuckle as kind of necessary for submarine to get legs. Next up, we've got Sharpening Stone. Sharpening Stone is our first loot that we're looking at here. I put this in the nothing better category. In general, this doesn't give a lot of damage. And sometimes you're doing a one weapon build, or you've got a pistol sword here, and you just need a little bit more damage added to the baseline of those items. And for that reason, Sharpening Stone's there for you. It's not quite enough to be super impactful, you know, especially this 5. You know, I'd love to see this like at a 8, 12, 16, something like that. I think it'd be a lot better because most of the Sharpening Stones you get are silver. So as it stands right now, I wouldn't over prioritize this, even if you have a build that relies on damage. All right. Next up is our slow build. The whole point of slow build is to utilize items like Lighthouse, which is when you slow, charge this, and it does burn damage. And what is it? Dark something. Yeah, Dark Water Anglerfish, when you slow, charge this, does burn damage, right? The goal is to slow things and burn things. The kind of best item in the slow build is, and actually I'll say this too in just a sec, is Docklines. Docklines is really strong. It was really, really strong when it was a 4-second cooldown. At 5 seconds, I'd like to see this get bumped up to 4 seconds for Docklines to keep its prevalence. But at Diamond, slowing 4 items for 3 seconds every 5 seconds is insanely strong. And once you give this thing haste, then it kind of permanently hastes 4 things, right? Slow is an extremely powerful ability. This is 4 triggers, meaning it's essentially 8 seconds of charge on our Lighthouse or Dark Water Anglerfish, whatever, which is really strong. You should take note that Docklines is also near the top of usually good, almost in the always good category. So one of Vanessa's best items, and can pretty much be slotted into most builds, even if it's just temporarily, and you'll get a significant impact from that. Next up, we've got Lighthouse. Lighthouse is the main payoff for the slow build. It has a high amount of burn, a relatively low cooldown, and is benefited by charge. Your first goal of playing this build should be getting this down to 6.6 seconds. That way, if you trigger 3 slows, then it will charge at 2 seconds, then 0.2 seconds based on the internal cooldown before it charges it again. So at 6.6 seconds, that's 3 2-second charges and 3 0.2 second internal cooldown waiting periods. So 6.6 is kind of where you at. 6.5 to be guaranteed. That's kind of your main goal with the Lighthouse right now, because that will make sure that you know, when a Docklines slows 3 things, that Lighthouse gets a free attack basically from that. This is probably one of the best enchantments you can get is Heavy, because then it you know, scales itself. Obsidian is also very good with this. Anything that allows you to sort of stack burn on this Lighthouse tends to be very strong. Next up is Tripwire, another one of these items that kind of fits almost into every single build, but is especially good in this build. When your enemy uses an item, slow it for 1, then 2 seconds. This used to be Diamond at 1 second, and so it's significantly better now that it's Diamond at 2 seconds. This benefits a lot from items like the Makeshift Barricade and the Improvised Bludgeon. I think those are the names of those items. These things, when they're sold, add slow to an item, and those make these very, very strong. It's worth noting that this also has an extremely, it has a few very good options when it comes to its enchantments, namely Icy, Turbo, Heavy, even Fiery here can be extremely good for our build because we're probably going to get some residual burn increases from some skills that we have lying around. And that can be pretty good. All that being said, this is weak to builds that don't use a lot of items, but on average, if you've got something like a tripwire and something like dock lines, the dock lines really is very good against those slow builds, and the tripwire is very good against those fast builds with many items. So you're kind of covering both bases. And it's a meta choice, right? The proboscis neutral item here just says when you slow, deal damage. This is a payoff that you can get for your slow build, and it's usually pretty easy to get the proboscis. It has some pretty good enchantments on it, which is pretty strong, and you're really just looking to figure out a way to increase its damage, but for every slow trigger, you're getting damage added, and that can be pretty powerful. Next up is the definitely pay-to-win item, the Zorsid or Zoarsid. Not sure exactly, but Zoarsid sounds cooler. This little fella here is a pretty cool little item, a nice little benefit to this little package here. He's 7-second cooldown, does some damage, good haste amounts when at higher level, and when you burn, charge this 1 second. So this is, for a tiny little guy, this fits really nicely in this slow build. Setting this up next to your dock lines, next to your Clemora, or even the lighthouse and darkfish angler, the dark water anglerfish, can be very strong. And I just had a thought, I wonder how, we have a 0.2 second internal cooldown, but when you're hasted, that's actually like a 0.4 second internal cooldown because you're during that time you're moving at double speed. So that's interesting. So I'll have to think about what that means for like if you're permanently hasted and you're trying to get charge triggers while taking into account haste actually changes up that calculation. And I never really realized that until now. Anyway, Zorsid, cool item, fits great into this. Is adding haste. It's adding another way to accelerate. That's one of the things this build was missing is like the haste triggers. And Zoarsid here really solves that. Really, really helps. Very good. Here's our boy, the dark water anglerfish. Said his name right. Could be a girl. I can't remember. I think I can't remember. Yeah, I think the big ones are girls, right? So the anglerfish that are males are just little tiny little dudes. So it goes. Nature be that way. All right, dark water anglerfish. I think this is a pretty good item. I actually lost to this item today. I think it's fairly well positioned. I wish that you could get this at bronze. I don't think it's too strong. I think it's similar to Lighthouse. And the big thing that's better is, sure, you don't get much burn, but you get another space. And so the question is, how impactful is that extra space on the board? And, if you've got like a shipwreck going on, and that's a good point. Shipwreck really could be down here in the slow build. That's a mistake on my part. Shipwreck really should be down here. When I post the link, I will include that change and put Shipwreck down here in the slow build. Because having this have like multicast 2, having multicast 2 on your dock lines, and on your Zoarsid, all those things can really add up to be more impactful. And you get that one extra space, and because you've got like a thick shipwreck on your board, every little space matters as far as what you can actually achieve. So I think it's pretty good. Nothing exciting, not an OP item, but it fits in this build. Next up, we've got Clemora. Clemora here is near the top of Situationally OP. This is a good item. The best part about this item is that it's used at the start of each fight, which is nice and thematic. It's like a paparazzi camera vibe. I like that. The big thing is that this slows 4 items, so it really supercharges this build, even if it never gets any upgrades from stuff like Makeshift Barricade or Improvised Bludgeon. That being said, it's it's kind of best positioned in its vanilla state in this slow build as just a way to rocket that build forward. Its enchantments are pretty weak. Shiny's pretty good. But other than that, maybe Heavy's pretty good. Other than that, it's not really doing too much. Next up, we've got Illusoray. Illusoray is a unique item. This can basically get to a 3x multicast, which is about a 2.3 second cooldown, essentially, which is quite low. You just have to wait 8 seconds for it. It does have a little bit of uniqueness with like this deadly enchant, giving adjacent friends crit chance, kind of cool. Good thing to call out these kind of unique enchantments that exist out there. That being said, the slow duration's pretty good. It just comes a little late and kind of requires you to have setup. That being said, that does fit pretty well in this build. I think it fits a little better here than it does in the Aquatic build. It's just a little slow, but it is 3 at Diamond. It is 3 triggers of 4 seconds slow, which is quite strong. It's similar to dock lines and only takes up 1 space. And if you can easily meet the friend adjacency, then don't dock it. I think people skip this over a little too easily. Next up, we've got one of the items from Vanessa's Mysteries of the Deep package. So this has 2 ammo, a very long cooldown, a little bit of damage, a little bit of burn. But whenever you slow, this actually scales pretty well as far as damage and burn. So this is kind of in that same position as like Torpedo, where you kind of almost like it to be slow because you kind of want the game to end when it first attacks. That like first attack, you want it to kind of kill them, right? It is interesting in that it has some unique enchantments here. 6 seconds is very strong, kind of reminiscent of Cannon, right? Except for the Icy here is a little different than the way that Cannon was. It's a decent payoff for all your slow packages. Far, far better payoff than something like Jit. So you want to know why Jit's down here? Well, because Mantis Shrimp exists, and it's just better than Jit. That being, is it necessary for this build? Not at all. It's easily skippable, but it can be a worthwhile payoff, especially at these higher levels at like Diamond and Gold. Next up is Electric Eels. Electric Eels is a very cool item that is very tough to use and was... what's the word? Now is worse because it's a 7-second cooldown, because it doesn't meet its threshold for sort of 2 charges make it get used. It's nice in the sense that it can do a lot. It can slow. It can do damage. It can attack quickly. All that fits pretty nicely into the slow build. It needs a lot of love. All right. You really need to get the cooldown to 6.4 seconds. You need to get it to Diamond. And you need to get it some damage, because 10 damage is not nearly enough. So this one, I've had games where this thing was doing 700 damage. All right. I mean, I've had that happen to me. Those are few and far between. But this can sit on your board at Gold or Diamond and will trigger a lot of slows. And if you have a way to improve its damage, it can be better than Proboscis. But often Proboscis just is a better payoff for damage for your slow triggers. And this item's very weak if they have items that trigger very slowly. So like I would never put Electric Eels and Tripwire in unless the meta was really, really fast and a lot of combo-centric like dually stuff was happening. Because then you're just incredibly weak to, the first Beast of Burden that comes your way. So yeah, well, I guess Beast of Burden isn't the best choice, but maybe Regal Blade is a better choice. All right, that was a slow build. Now we are into the aquatic build. Top of the aquatic build is the lowly jellyfish. The jellyfish. Why? Why is this at the top? Because whenever you use an adjacent aquatic item, this gains haste. Why does that matter? Because haste is the absolute currency of the aquatic build. All right, haste triggers pufferfish. It also triggers, where is it? Catfish. It also triggers Arbalist and Shark Ray. Haste is kind of the main thing that you're trying to generate for these builds because you're going to pay off in a big way, mostly with pufferfish, shark ray, or arbalist. Those are kind of your biggest payoffs, right? And jellyfish is what you use to do that. It just generates an incredible amount of haste triggers. It did get its cooldown reduced. It would be 9 seconds after the Great Bonkening if it didn't get reduced to 6 seconds the patch before. That being said, I would not be surprised if at some point this gets a little bit of a touch, just because it hastes itself way more than it needs to be, and I don't know how the devs feel about that. That being said, it is a necessary item for most of these aquatic builds because you're looking to get payoffs for those haste triggers, and this is just something that generates a bajillion of them. Next up is pufferfish. So cute, so coy, so about to be eaten by a shark maybe. This item's good. Not amazing. It used to be super busted. I mean, this item has been busted multiple times in the game up to this point, and I think now it's pretty well positioned. Doesn't have anything special as far as enchants go. The goal here is that you're trying to meet critical thresholds on your cooldowns based on haste triggers, and that just allows you to like spam poison, and that turns out to be really strong, especially in the early game. One of the things to call out about aquatic builds is, you know, if I get an aquatic set up early, I will lean hard into aquatic builds. But if I don't get that set up early, aquatic builds fall off as the game goes on. And they're really good at getting like 10 win perfect wins when you get a good setup. But they really struggle after day 12 because people are just so fast, and poison's a slow way to kill people. And you tend not to have the best defense. So keep that in mind when building your aquatic builds. Oh man, my love is Pearl. 5-second cooldown, a little bit of shield, all right? And then anytime you use any other aquatic item, charge this 1 second. What more could you ask for? This is a super powerful item. You often put this next to your jellyfish or your water wheel here as something that's a quickly triggering item. It's also a great way to trigger dam very quickly because all your other aquatic stuff triggers this really quickly. Just a truly solid item, really useful to stack up shield benefits on it, and does a lot for you. A staple of the aquatic build, pretty much should be in every aquatic build. Next up is the newly buffed Shipwreck, which has really improved the viability of this item. You can now get it at gold. The crit chance doesn't matter. Giving your aquatic items multicast is insanely good. All of the enchantments on this almost are insanely good. Deadly's mid. Shiny is insanely good. Toxic and fiery are mid. Okay, so they're not all crazy. They're usually pretty good. Even Obsidian here can be quite good. Radiance also mid. But all that being said, Shipwreck really good. Really fits with a lot of things that you'd want to be doing in your aquatic build. Doubling a shark ray, doubling a anchor, doubling seaweed or primordial primordial is kind of just fine, but beach ball especially can be really strong. All that stuff, so good. Next up is water wheel. Water wheel is one of the premium haste generators in the game. Basically, the idea here is you want to put 2 fast triggering items. Sometimes that's a pearl and a pufferfish in the late game next to the water wheel. And then this kind of permanently hastes your board. One thing to call out for this is that water wheel tends to be better with many small items because it hastes all those items. And if you have more items, that's more haste triggers for pufferfish. So one mistake I see is like people flooding with people having pearl, puffer, and then 2 medium weapons or medium items. And that tends not to be very good with water wheel because it's not enough haste triggers to really keep pufferfish shooting like a machine gun. Another thing to keep in mind with water wheel is because it has this cooldown reduction mechanic, any cooldown reduction you get at silver will be magnified with each upgrade because cooldown reduction loot captures a flat amount of cooldown reduction and then applies that flat cooldown reduction at the lower amount. So if I reduce my cooldown by 0.5 seconds with a insect wing, well, this will be 9.5, then 8.5, then 7.5. And so at that was a 5% reduction at 10 seconds, but at 7.5, that's a 1/8 reduction, which is significantly better. So any cooldown reduction you can apply at the higher cooldown amount will make your lower cooldown amount item better. Oops. Seaweed. Seaweed. Oh, what a wonderful little item here. Such a great payoff for all your aquatic item triggers. Has some really cool bespoke, toxic and fiery effects here. Well, I guess they used to be bespoke and now they're more normal, but these are very strong, right? And can be a very powerful tool. Also, if you go aquatic versus aquatic, the person who has the higher level seaweed tends to win. Unless, one person is just way stronger with their aquatic build. So seaweed is also a good mirror match. Sometimes I will keep a seaweed in my stash and then field it when I see a Vanessa, just in case we go puffer to puffer, because that seaweed is going to be very, very impactful in that particular matchup. Next up, we've got fishing rod. Fishing rod can be put on your board in the early days. This is giving you a significant amount of haste. But the biggest thing that it does is gives you a small aquatic item. There are quite a few small aquatic items that really don't need to be upgraded to be very strong. Namely, we've got jellyfish, pearl, seaweed's okay. Ambergris is really good. Those are kind of the main ones, but that's quite a lot. And those get even more impactful the more of them you have on the board. So if you can have like quite a few pearls on the board, and that can be really strong because they all charge each other, and you can end up like shielding an incredible amount because all of these pearls are just like, or you can get multiple jellyfishes and like not even have something that's applying haste to your board, literally just like turning your pufferfish into a machine gun by just using jellyfishes and pearls and stuff like that. So fishing rod is good. It won't be on your board after the first couple days, but it gives you the opportunity to high roll in a very big way. Next up, we've got Primordial Depth Charge. This is a new item with the Mysteries of the Deep pack. One day I'll remember that. This item used to be OP. It just got changed. I think it's strong now. It's probably the best item from that card pack from Vanessa. And this being the best item is pretty cool. This feels just like kind of a new way to play aquatic. It doesn't feel too overpowered. It doesn't necessarily feel that great to lose to because it's kind of a built-in mass freeze mechanic. And if you're not playing any important large items, this can kind of like shut you out of the game, especially if it has like 2 ammo or 3 ammo. That being said, it's kind of a unique build around for the aquatic build. There's a case to be made that this should just go into situationally OP because it really needs the Yeti crab to really get going. And the reason is because you nestle your Yeti crab between 2 poison items. And then this just, when the primordial depth charge goes off and does an 8 times multicast, you end up adding 8 times 4 poison to the 2 adjacent items. And then like the next time that they like trigger off, you end up doing like some crazy poison damage. Is that amazing? It's good. It's good. It really combines very well with the freeze. Is it OP? I have a hard time saying it's OP. I have never lost to this build, except for maybe one time, and that was before it got nerfed. So, it's good. It's in the middle of the aquatic build. Next up is one of my faves, Ambergris. Ambergris is a great little economic item. Pretty much never goes on your board. It just doesn't heal enough. But the goal here is that you can kind of keep this in your stash, and this triggering when you buy an aquatic item for this payoff turns out to actually be quite good. Even at bronze, getting a $1 discount on every single aquatic item you would buy in the early game, very strong. It has hilariously bad enchantments for a 7-second cooldown item. It's just an absolute joke. But that being said, a great economic item. Definitely not something you want to put on your board unless you just have literally nothing else to put there. Next up is Beach Ball. Beach Ball is great, and it's especially good for the astute user who is hasting the optimal amount of targets. So this hastes 1, 2, 3, or 4 aquatic or toys for 2 seconds at a 5-second cooldown. Now this used to be a 4-second cooldown, and it was much better because then it would haste itself and it would kind of infinitely loop itself. I would like to see this being raised to 2.5 seconds because this item was disproportionately affected by the Great Bonketing. That being said, still a great haste generator for the aquatic build. And the main thing you want to do is just be thinking about what items you're hitting. You know, like I'll put this on my board at silver with a catfish and then no other aquatic items or toys, because then that catfish is just going to be constantly hasted by the beach ball, and that ends up being really strong. So the big thing here is just, you know, it's best when it's either diamond and it's just hasting a lot, or you've used something like the rocket boots up here to increase its haste amount, or it's hitting the exact targets that you want to hit and no more. It is usually just kind of a little worse than Water Wheel, but it is smaller, and sometimes it does everything you need. So, you know, consider Beach Ball. It is not too bad. Its enchantments could use a little love. Dive Weights is a cool item. I think this, especially in its current iteration after it got nerfed after the patch, I think it's a sweet little item. I think it's not too OP, and it really serves a unique purpose. Especially in any build, but in the aquatic build I think is where it's best. But I think you could use this in an ammo build too, which maybe I'll move this up there as well. The problem is you don't get the cooldown reduction, which is actually a pretty big deal. All that being said, you know, this is sort of a 6-second cooldown, multicast 4 at gold is where this kind of gets good. And this just jump starts your build. That's really kind of what I look at this as. It's kind of like holsters for your board. Getting more ammo on this is really, really cool. I love this item's design, and I like that it's not too OP. I like that it runs out of ammo, and it's really only good right there at the beginning. It's a cool item. It really is. The question you want to ask yourself is, when I hit dive weights, is it important that at 6 seconds in or 5 seconds in with some cooldown reduction, that my build just hits hard and goes fast? And if it's true, and it usually is the case that you want that, dive weights is a good way to do that. But this does not help you in the long term. You know, if you're really slugging it out with a Pygmalion, you know, there's a lot of items that are going to do better than a dive weights. So this is one of those items I keep in my stash, and then I kind of flex in and out depending on who I'm playing against, depending how I feel the power level of my build is. Next up is Turtle Shell. Turtle Shell used to be one of the most broken items in the game, and now with it being at 7 seconds and only a 1-second charge, this is a good item when you have a significant amount of shields that will benefit from its impact. You know, this is more like the shield centric. You know, I've got maybe 2 pearls from fishing rod. I've got a turtle shell and a pufferfish and a jellyfish, and maybe a water wheel, and that's my whole build. This can be very, very strong. You really want this cooldown to get lower. You know, at 6 seconds, this was already pretty high. At 7 seconds, it's getting really high. But it does scale you up quite quickly. Its enchantments are pretty weak, so it's not a good enchant target, but it is pretty strong, and definitely not top tier, but when you've got the right positioning, or you've got like a shielded enchantment on something, this can really make the difference. Next up here is my boy Catfish. I think the current iteration of Catfish is so good. This is one of the better items you can get early game because Poison 3 is strong enough right out of the gate that it actually is very impactful early game. It also scales up pretty nicely with haste. You know, you can get a captain's wheel here in your aquatic build and you know, easily stack the poison up on this catfish and have it be doing quite a lot. You know, once it gets to gold, I would say is when it really can crank up. Because this is like every 2.5 seconds, you're adding 3, so you're essentially like doubling or adding a 100% increase to the base, and that you know, that adds up. I do think that some of these enchantments are a little mid. The fiery one's pretty good. Shiny's good. You know, and I guess that's fine, right? The obsidian for this one actually ends up being pretty decent. Best, really good item early. It tends not to find its way, stay on my board as I get later into the game. Chum is an item that's really come back for me. This got a buff where it's going from 4% to 10% on the crit chance, and that feels really good. You get a piranha, which means it's a decent, like it's not very costly to upgrade it because you get a piranha as well, and then you can sell that piranha because it's trash, and then you get basically a chum for free, basically, which is awesome, or half price. I can't think right now. I've been talking for a long time. All that being said, I actually think if I could redo this, I would put chum a little higher, maybe even above ambergris. This gets a lot of crit really quickly, and that crit ends up mattering. And at 5 seconds, it's a low enough cooldown that it can be the item that you put next to your pearl or the jellyfish or to the water wheel. You know, it's fast enough where, you know, it can be that item until you have something else going on. It's got a kind of a unique obsidian enchantment here, which is a good call out. And the deadly on it is pretty good. So cool item. You know, I think that maybe this could be a little higher on this list because I think it's actually quite strong. Next up, we've got Seashell. Seashell's a decent cooldown item with a big aquatic synergy payoff. Generally, this is going to do a little bit better when you have more smaller items on the field. You know, this can get to the point where, you know, it's doing 200 shield every 6 seconds. I would say this tends to be best in the mid game. It doesn't trigger quite fast enough for Turtle Shell to really make it worth it. So like the fact that it has a little anti-synergy with the Turtle Shell makes it a little weird. It does have some decent like enchantments with the Toxic, Fiery, and Obsidian that kind of work okay with the Turtle Shell. That being said, you know, it's something that I tend to have relatively often on my board in the early game, but rarely makes it into late game. Very similar to Catfish in that way. Shark Ray was my most recent 10 wins run. Shark Ray is a decent item with a decent cooldown and decent scaling. Basically, this is just another option as far as, you know, I didn't find a puffer that whole build. That whole run, and so I instead used a Shark Ray because that was going to be the thing that captured all my haste triggers, and it was enough, along with Chum, to end up killing them on like the second or third or maybe fourth attack from Shark Ray, because then I'd have like 40 to 60% crit and maybe like 2,000 damage on my Shark Ray, and that's a lot of damage. This has some decent enchantments, pretty good target. Deadly's good, Shiny's good. You can't really get Shiny though. Radiant is good. Toxic and Fiery, Obsidian. I had Heavy on mine and that was fine enough. But Turbo would also be pretty good, and Shielded. So honestly, this is a great enchantment target, which is one of the reasons that it is as good as it is. Just under Shark Ray is a very similar item. This has more limitations. It's a slower cooldown and it needs some ammo fixing, but this thing is a hyper charging item if you can get all those things solved. Look at the scaling between this and Shark Ray. 60, 80, 100, and then Shark Ray 20, 30, 40. The Arbalist is literally disgusting amounts of damage. Disgusting amount of damage. It's got really, really good enchantments, an amazing enchantment target. You just got to solve its problems, and if you can do that, man, I've gotten a lot of 10 wins by just 2 ammo on an Arbalist in an aquatic build, and then it just does like 5,000 damage. Super fun. It doesn't get benefits from like Chum and stuff, so that's why it's a little lower, right? One of my favorite ways to play the aquatic build is something like Jellyfish and Anchor together, because these have similar effects. Whenever you use an adjacent item, they gain haste, and this item does percentage-based damage, so it tends to stay relatively impactful no matter how much health they have, so like especially good against Pygmalions who are health stacking, right? It's a great enchantment target, does a lot of damage. Getting a Toxic, Fiery, or Obsidian, or Crit, all those end up being really, really strong. And it is since its cooldown is so high, any cooldown reduction you get for it is very impactful. It's not great because it's so slow and it's only 30% of the enemy's max health. But if you get 2 crits of that, if they don't heal, is enough to kill, right? So pretty good item. Definitely has a place in the aquatic build. I've definitely got 10 wins with it on the board, but needs a little love. We've talked about Illusoray. I think Illusoray's decently positioned in the aquatic build. The main thing here is that it is some slow. It is a fair amount of triggers, once you actually get it to actually meet the 3 multicast. It's nothing exciting, but I've seen it stick on my board until almost day 8 or 9 or 10 even, and then it gets swapped out for a slight improvement. This is an aquatic item that technically has a low cooldown due to its multiple multicasts, and that can usually be enough to keep it around for a little while. Next up is one of my faves, Dam. Dam has a very interesting... Now, this is incorrect. I think this goes from 25 to 20 seconds when it gets upgraded. I could be wrong about that, but I was pretty sure about that, and now I'm second-guessing myself. We'll trust how Bazaar, but, check for yourself when you look at this. But very meta-dependent, whether Dam is good or not. The real question for you is, the real goal in the aquatic build with Dam is I need to apply a bunch of poison and then destroy all the items, and then they die to poison. That's the goal with Dam, right? Is my puffer triggers 6 times, and then Dam fires, and then they just tick out from 200 poison damage while I sit there and take no damage. The big problem with Dam is it doesn't kill large items. So when large items like Flagship or the Boulder or Slumbering Primordial or Beast of Burden or what's the dually? Ray. For some reason, I can't remember the tech item that is the large damage payoff for the tech synergy. But those things end up killing you sometimes. Sometimes not, though. Sometimes you get enough poison. The real determination is whether you are fast enough, your build is quick enough to get enough poison out where Dam actually matters. Where Dam ends up truly turning the tide because you don't need more triggers and they are too slow, right? So really fun item. Cool animation. When you get a good Dam build, which I've had a couple where I've used this exact situation, man, there's almost nothing like it. But the question is it a good position in the meta to be doing Dam? And are you fast enough to get enough poison out? That's the big question. All right, next up, we've got the ammo build. We are making our slow, steady way through this. At this point, as I'm going through the tier list, I just wanted to call out that, these items that are usually good and situationally OP can fit into these lower builds. So like Sextant and Captain's Wheel and Pet Rock can definitely fit into the aquatic build, no problem. That's why they're up here, is because they fit in kind of no matter what. As I'm explaining, the aquatic build here, these do fit in here. And one criticism I have of the way that I've laid this out is not duplicating these where they fit within this build, because that would I think be a little bit helpful. But I would suffice it to say that, these are on the higher end of almost every build that they're in. They're not the highest, but they're like in the middle of every single build below them. So let's talk about the ammo build. Ramrod is definitely one of the best, if not the best, like kind of ammo enablers for the ammo build. It used to be better. It's still good. The big thing it does is it gives all your ammo items 40% crit. I'll also call out that it used to be one of the worst items in the game. Oh my goodness, it used to be so terrible. It only reloads one ammo every 5 seconds, but it reloads 2 items. So you really want to think about that when you're trying to get maximum value. This used to reload 1, 2, 3, 4 as you level it up, or 1, 2, 3 as you level it up. And now that it's just 1, You do have to be a bit more thoughtful about it, but it does have this condition. When one of your items runs out of ammo, charge this 1 second. So you kind of want to utilize this and maybe some cooldown, maybe some hasting to try to get the most out of this ramrod. But basically, this is just one of the most efficient ways that you can reload items in the game right now. Oops. There he is. Pistol Sword. Pistol Sword, one of the coolest items in the game, has some of the most unique or has some kind of like bespoke enchantments, and it's an amazing payoff for using ammo items. Okay, so one of the best ways to use the Pistol Sword is it has 3 ammo, it does a little damage, but then it adds flat damage anytime you use an ammo item. The goal is, how can I get this flat damage up? Well, that damage is tied to the damage of the item. It's a nice low cooldown. It's a great enchant target. You know, you get poison, you get burn when you use ammo. You slow every time you use an ammo. You freeze every time you use an ammo. You haste every time you use an ammo. That's crazy. That's crazy. But deadly is probably one of the best ones. This just is like, what is that? Building crescendo skill before it got nerfed. This is just one of the most insane enchants in the game. Super, super strong, super high roll potential, great enchant target. One of the ways that I play this item is by putting it next to Switchblade, which is why I have that included here. And then, you know, this fires 3 times and, you know, gets, you know, 16, 24, 36 damage added to it. And that's recouped for every ammo trigger for everything else by just adding this sort of little tiny Switchblade here. Switchblade really fits into this build pretty well, mostly because of that, or you know, other items being next to it and being able to like kind of trigger a lot, like Grape Shot or Pistol here. Super cool, super fun item, love it. You know, when people say that they just love meat and potatoes, that's what the double barrel is, man. Meat one barrel, potatoes the other. Meat and potatoes. All right. This guy is pretty low cooldown. Multicast 2, a thick bit of damage. Its enchants are fine. The big thing here is it just is a lot of damage per ammo. And if you can solve the ammo problems with double barrel, it will pay off for you in the amount of damage that it outputs. You know, at silver, it's already doing quite a lot of damage. This is one of the best items to put skill damage increases like left-handed or right-handed on. Nothing too special about its enchants. It's kind of like a weapon, but like it doesn't scale up naturally. So like toxic and fiery tend to be pretty good. Obsidian tends to be pretty good. Radiant and deadly tend to be pretty good. These other ones are kind of mid. The shield and restorative aren't as good because this doesn't scale up as much, and that's kind of what you're looking for with those. They're fine, but they're nothing exciting. So double barrel, one of the best items in the game, and especially very good here in the ammo build. All right, we talked a little bit about Switchblade here, but it was buffed, I think, maybe 2 patches ago. And whenever you use an adjacent weapon, give it extra damage. It does decent damage on its own, nothing special. Nothing special either as far as its enchants. But, putting this next to the Pistol Sword or the Ballista or Grape Shot, these are just ways to kind of scale that damage really high, or even double barrel. This is just some natural scaling that you can get for pretty cheap. And the ammo build really benefits from a little bit of scaling. And Switchblade is one of the accessible ways to do that. Don't dock it. And Switchblade really fits into like a full weapon build very well for the same reason. I cannot tell you the number of times that I have lost day 1 or day 2 to a silver grenade that crits me. It's got 1 ammo, it's got a whole bunch of damage, it's a small item, and it's got 25% crit chance out of the gate. It's also got some decent, all things being considered, some decent enchantments. Toxic, fiery, icy, heavy, turbo, obsidian, radiant, and deadly. And deadly is unique because this does double crit damage with the deadly. So yeah, this one has some pretty unique enchantments. This is one that I tend to end up putting next to my ramrod because it constantly runs out of ammo and then charges the ramrod, which is very strong. Grenade was a item I think the community slept on for a long time, And now that everything's kind of shaken out, this one's actually kind of bubbled up to near the top of the weapons in Vanessa's kit. Next up, we've got Javelin. Javelin's a nice little 2 ammo item with a big damage payout, especially at silver, already at 120. 5-second cooldown anytime you haste reload, so it has its own sort of natural reloading mechanic. Decent enchant target. Just solid damage. Nothing special to say about this, but the cost for like what it does, it has self-reloading, it does good damage, it's not too slow. Happy to slap this on my ammo board most of the time. Tends not to stay all the way to 10 or all the way to 10 wins or all the way to the end game, but often is a big part of my early and mid game ammo builds. Grape Shot's one of my favorite designed items, not because it does anything special, but because of the way that it adds emergent complexity for such a simple item. 2 ammo, low cooldown at 4 seconds, mediocre damage, and this will probably eventually get changed where like it starts out at 30 and ends up at 50 or something like that once they do more passes of this. But the big thing here is that this is an item that doesn't really run out of ammo as long as you have other ammo items, and you don't need to like solve its own ammo problem. It doesn't have anything special as far as its enchantments go, but just having something that's relatively quick, little bit of extra damage, it's going to add the flat damage from pistol sword. Maybe you're scaling it with the switchblade. This item did get significantly weaker due to the Great Bonkening because it didn't get any love and it got 33% worse. So we'll see if this ends up getting moved back to 3 seconds. I think this would be pretty well positioned at 3 seconds. Whoop. None of these. All right, next up is Revolver. Another one of these items that was very much hit by the Great Bonkening. 3 seconds to 4 seconds is a significant decrease in effectiveness. That being said, cool item. Really like this one. It has a natural crit chance. It reloads whenever you crit, and that means when anything crits, not just itself. But when this is the only thing on your board early game, and this is the only thing critting, it has a decent chance to kind of shoot between like 8 and 10 times as opposed to just 6 times, which is usually enough for the game to be the fight to be over. This is just a nice fast firing item that has crit, that is using ammo, that's getting benefits from the pistol sword. It'll charge up your ballista. It is self-sufficient in the same way that Grape Shot is self-sufficient, and that's why it has a place in the ammo build. Next up is Powder Flask. One thing I'll call out here is that if I see a bronze Powder Flask in the early game, I pretty much always pick it up, every time. Just because I don't know what I'm up to at that point, and I could always be building an ammo build, and just having a one item that's a 5-second reload of 1 ammo is often enough to like, oh, I found a double barrel, I can use it now. Oh, I found a silver grenade, well, let's just put a Powder Flask on it, and that's really strong, right? So I think Powder Flask is really good. I think it has some unique enchantments, like we've got this unique deadly enchantment here. Other than that, the enchantments don't seem too interesting, although you can make a good case for Radiant on this item is actually quite good. It's rare that you really need to actually restore more than 2 or 3 ammo. Sometimes 1 is plenty. But there are situations with like a throwing knife combo where getting 4 ammo back on that throwing knives and then it's just gone, like that all of the ammo's gone within 1 second, makes the Powder Flask actually kind of good in those situations. It's in the middle of the pack, nothing special, but it's needed. You got to have ammo, right? One item that was disproportionately positively impacted by the Great Bonkening is the Ballista. I would have probably put this at the end of the ammo build or in nothing better, but this patch, this item's really shown something that I knew already about it. I knew that it was actually really close to being good enough, but now that the game has slowed down a little bit, this item's pretty well positioned. It does a lot of damage. It already has 2 ammo, and with the idea being that why would you need a 3rd ammo? If they're not dead, you lost, brother. If they took a 20 multicast ballista to the face and you didn't kill them, They deserve to win. All right, you fucked up. All right, somewhere along the lines, you dropped the ball. All right, really good enchant target. I mean, every single item except for, weirdly enough, shiny is an extremely good enchant target. Maybe Radiance also mid. Everything else is so good, including these shielded and restorative ones, because, you know, with these healing or, you know, tanky centric ones, like if you get this to 12 multicast and then it starts shielding you for 200 every 0.2 seconds for 3 seconds, you know, there's a good chance you're going to make it to that second attack. And then it's going to do like a 23 multicast to their dome, man. And if you're stacking it next to a switchblade over here, that thing is going to just be constantly increasing in damage. If you've got the tempering skill, which adds damage every time you use an item. Don't sleep on Ballista. I think it's much better positioned than it was in the previous patch. Really good payoff for the ammo build. Nesting Doll can get thrown in there, by the way, when you have a Ballista. All right, Port is a pretty decent item. It reloads a lot of ammo, more ammo than you probably need every 7 seconds. But the biggest thing that it does is gets small ammo items. You can have Port on your board, but you don't have to. It's got some decent options as far as its enchantments. Like Obsidian turns it into a miniature pistol sword. Deadly turns it kind of into a ramrod. You know, Shiny actually makes this very good because you charge twice. 7 seconds is a little high for this particular effect on the board. The main time that you really want Port is when you have ammo problems. And things like repeaters and throwing knives and grenades and double barrel. You know, if you're kind of building into that direction, Port does a lot better because not only does it charge all those items, but it just throws so much ammo back onto your board every time it triggers. That's really what Port's for. And don't get that twisted, all right? This is not for every ammo build. This is for specifically those builds that are just chugging through ammo. And that's a very specific subset of items. You know, that's not every item in the least. But the biggest thing that it does is this bottom text. And, you know, you can get haste potions, flashbangs. The flashbang is so good. It slows their whole board. Haste potions, haste your whole board. That's the stuff that really makes Port crazy. And that's what really takes this item to kind of the next level. Next up is Throwing Knives. Throwing Knives, really cool item. Has pretty low ammo, pretty quick cooldown. This was very much disproportionately negatively impacted by the Great Bonkening because now it doesn't charge itself. I do think this item would work at 3 seconds, or maybe if these get changed to charge different amounts. But really, you need this to get to 3.2 seconds before it's going to be absolutely insane. Another way I could see this is changing this to a 2-second flat and doubling the damage. Something like that I think would be good for Throwing Knives. Throwing Knives is pretty good. It's got decent enchantments considering it's a small item and that it triggers really fast. Like slow 1 for 2 is above rate for something that might trigger a bajillion times. The big problem is it runs out of ammo, so you have to solve its ammo problems. This usually has to be either right next to a diamond or like a gold powder flask, or it has to be next to the ramrod, or it has to be with a Port. And it's difficult to get a good payoff for it. This item got a lot weaker with the Great Bonkening, so we'll see what the future holds for it. Next up, one of my favorite items is the Repeater. Again, another one that was disproportionately impacted by the Great Bonkening because once it was at Diamond, it would always guarantee self-charge itself, but now you have to get it a 6.4 seconds cooldown for that to happen. Decent amount of damage, decent enchantments. You know, I think you're kind of looking for Heavy or Turbo or Toxic, Fiery, or Obsidian, maybe Radiant or Deadly. The big thing here is that the Shielded and Restorative aren't quite as good on it. And it kind of needs to be Diamond. That's the really biggest negative for the Repeater, is that it's pretty mid until it gets there. But then, once it's there, and you have a lot of other ammo triggers, this item can absolutely mow people down, but man, does it run out of ammo quickly. So I tend to run this with either next to the ramrod or with a port or next to a powder flask, because it's one that can really eat through your ammo once you've kind of met that critical threshold of just churning through ammo. But if you can solve that problem, it will reward you for it. All right, took a little break there, and it's the morning, so let's finish up this tier list. Man, I've been talking for a while, but let's continue forward with Cannonball. We just talked about Repeater and how it's only really good at like diamond and gold because it needs those charge amounts. Cannonball is a very simple item. It does have some interesting enchants. So this one is at the start of fight. It does a slow, freeze, or haste, which is actually stronger than you might consider. Some of the other things are not as good for it though. That being said, the main thing here is that it's giving max ammo, and at diamond and gold it is giving a lot of max ammo. You know, putting this next to something like a throwing knives or a double barrel often is enough for that to have enough, like, sometimes can be enough for you to kill your opponent just based on that amount of ammo. And so in the cases where you have super high damage items or super high damage in general, and you're looking to just burst someone down, Cannonball actually can sometimes be better than the Ramrod build, because it means you can put more things on the board and you just stack ammo on the kind of items you have. If you've got other skills that are also giving you ammo, Cannonball can be better. And if you can get one of these sort of interesting enchantments on it, that makes it significantly better as well. Next up is Incendiary Rounds. Incendiary Rounds is an item I wish was better. It's a diamond only item. It just says when you use an adjacent item, burn 2, adjacent items have +2 ammo. This item is pretty weak. It's at the very bottom of the ammo build. You know, there's a really good case that this should just get thrown down here next to Blunderbuss and Musket. But sometimes you do need just +1 ammo, or you do need the burn, or that burn ends up stacking kind of decently, or you've got like a way to kind of like increase this burn amount. All that being said, this item's due for a buff, but every once in a while it's all that you have, and the extra ammo is very much needed, or the burn is very much needed to trigger a freeze on burn effect, something like that. So nothing special. I think there's a really good case that this should be in the nothing better category. I think this is a pretty weak item, so only be taking this in your ammo build if you absolutely need it. Next up, we are done with the ammo build, moving into the one weapon build, and we have Silencer here. Silencer, probably one of the best items in the game, and has been one of the best items in the game for a long time. It is basically the main enabler of the one weapon build, and the reason is because it gives damage to the item to the left of it, but interestingly enough, it doesn't care where the weapon is on your board, but if you only have one of them, reduce its cooldown by a significant amount. Not only that, this tends to have decent enchantments. Deadly can be extremely good. Shiny is one of the best enchantments in the game. And then the heavy, icy, and turbo are all very good with the Silencer, because it's almost always the case that your one weapon will be triggering a lot, which means it's a lot of slow, freeze, and haste effects. Especially haste. The fact that this hastes for 2 seconds is kind of crazy, even though it slows for 1. That's a little bit out of parity. That's usually not something you see. So turbo is a little overpowered compared to other situations. This item also has a unique situation where it doesn't scale kind of the way that most items are expected to scale in the Bazaar right now. Normally you'd see something like, you know, an even increase with a slight bump at bronze. We do see that here with the cooldown reduction, but so I expect to see passes on this to change the numbers a little bit, but one of the best items in the game, pretty much in the same way that I pretty much always pick up a bronze powder horn or powder flask for reload synergy. If I see a bronze Silencer early, I'll just pick it up because I don't know what build I'm going to do, and having that Silencer means that I can ease into a one weapon build at any point, especially because I can upgrade it to silver with a B1, B2 event so easily these days. Next up, we have one of my favorite items. It is Flagship. I think it's one of the best designed items in the game. Cooldown 7, it does good damage, and then it has a requirement. You need a tool, ammo, property, or friend to get +1 multicast for each. I think I'd love to do a whole video on just, optimal ways to build Flagship. Because there are a lot of ways to do this, and it's not always best to just get 5 multicast. And in fact, sometimes 3 or 4 multicast is far superior to 5 multicast. Very strong, lots of damage. You usually will have you'll have a silencer, a flagship, a crow's nest. Star chart is a tool. You'll have some small kind of ammo item. Maybe and then you're kind of at 1, 2, 3, so that's 4 times multicast there with that kind of situation, like a nesting doll. And I think you have that 3, 3, 5, 8, 9. Yep, with nesting doll that's 10. So that's a really good setup for flagship. There's a lot of different ways you can build it, and there's not a lot of wrong answers. Sextant's also a super good one here, as well as the captain's wheel. Those are both tools. Even dock lines can fit into this build very well when you have a flagship going. So really cool build around. Probably one of the best design items in the game, and I like to see that it's strong. The double barrel Big Hoss is back, and he is here for 1 weapon build. Probably the second, maybe the best single weapon item in the game. You have to solve its ammo problems, but just the amount of damage you get for the actual payoff here. This is essentially a 2-second cooldown item because it has multicast 2. It does really solid damage, and the enchantments on it are decent. You're probably mostly looking for toxic or fiery or deadly or radiant. These ones are the ones that are going to be the most effective, or obsidian. The rest of these are fine, but they're not nearly as strong. I mean, you could do icy as well, obviously. Excuse me. All around, just very strong, probably slightly overtuned item, just on the numbers. Another one of the best items in the game is the Swashbuckle. Swashbuckle gives crit adjacency and then gives extra damage equal to their crit chance. So it used to give kind of like it used to give more damage based on how much crit chance they had, but now I think it's just a flat transition. So read this as 50% crit chance, 50% damage, heal, and shield. And this should not be an or. It should be an and, because if it's like a submarine, it'll do damage and shield and end up double dipping on the shield, right? One of the reasons Swashbuckle is so good is that unlike a lot of items that are in this category that are basically a passive, this one doesn't have many enchantments. So 2/3 of the time, you get an incredible enchantment off of Swashbuckle, which is a little strange. The Radiant one here is trash because, sure, it can't get destroyed, which is not bad, but the other 2 effects, it's only using 1/3 of the Radiant effect, which is fine. But one of the best items in the game. This can fit into a full weapon build. Every once in a while, this fits into an ammo build too. There's a case to be made that this item can be moved up to even always good or usually good, now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more. Truly one of the best items in the game, and part of that is because of the way that this enchantment works. You can almost slot this into anything, especially if you can get it enchanted with your level 10 enchantment. Probably the item that you should just expect to be changed in the future is Crow's Nest. Crow's Nest is the main enabler for the 1 weapon build. It makes a weapon build into an incredibly tanky build because it gives your 1 weapon lifesteal. And right now, Rayned has hinted that lifesteal will probably undergo a change now that we have this restorative enchantment on weapons, which is basically doing what a lifesteal used to do. So we might see something change for lifesteal. It might end up being like a over time effect as opposed to like a something is similar to restorative. That being said, this gives all weapons crit. So this sometimes can fit into like a mass weapon build where you have like 6 weapons and then you have a crow's nest sitting there that's just giving like 60 crit to all of your weapons. That can be extremely strong. But the main claim to fame here is that A, it's a property for flagship, and B, it gives your 1 weapon lifesteal, which is absolutely nutty. Not only that, it's a great enchantment target. The shiny upgrade is super interesting and really cranks this into the stratosphere because you can have 2 or fewer weapons. Deadly is incredibly strong. And then the icy, turbo, and heavy are all extremely good. The fire and toxic are pretty weak. The shielded and restorative are also pretty weak. So, you know, you're getting about a 50% chance or so to get an extremely powerful enchantment when you go to the artist. And the artist is the event that gives you a random enchantment. So, a very good enchantment target. Or I would say a above average enchantment target. All right, the kind of next best weapon, in my opinion, for the one weapon build is the Cutlass. Cutlass is essentially a 3-second cooldown item. You'll notice a trend here. All of these items have multicast so far. Deals medium damage, but it has this absolutely insane multiplicative damage increase on its crit damage whenever it crits. Yeah, it turns out to be pretty insane. Also, it's, you know, we can see that the Tempest Flame Dancer here has a fiery version of it, which is, means that it's easier than normal to get this into fiery even early in the game. But Obsidian, Fiery, Toxic, Deadly, Shiny, Radiant, and then even Turbo, and it's a very good enchantment target. So a lot of enchantments can work really well on it. It's natural synergy with Swashbuckle and Crow's Nest. And, you know, once you've got someone with like 50% crit on this and it's doing like 30 damage and it has some way to scale, you know, and it's getting the extra damage from Silencer, you know, this item ends up being very, very high damage output and heals for an incredible amount of damage every time it crits, and becomes very problematic. The big thing is that it needs a little bit more love than, let's say, the double barrel and the flagship, and so that's why it's a little further down. These just have such a high natural amount of damage. The Cutlass kind of needs you to scale its damage up. So if you're going Cutlass, this Sharpened Stone down here does get a little bit better because you just do need to get damage added to this Cutlass for it to hit those crits and really spark some big numbers on the screen. You need a way to scale its damage. All right, next up is Star Chart. Star Chart gives a crit chance to adjacent items as well as cooldown to adjacent items. Fun item, terrible enchantment target. All of these things that are like the first time you fall below half health are usually absolute trash. I mean, really, and look, this is the first time you fall below half health, shield 120. Are you joking? Are you joking? That's terrible. You know, maybe this freeze one's okay. Maybe the slow one's fine. The freeze one's like probably the best one here, but the rest of them are really, really bad. Obviously, Shiny and Deadly are pretty good, but, you know, that's 1 out of 11 or 2 out of 11, so not the best enchantment target. That being said, this does give crit. It does give cooldown reduction when combined with, and it is a tool, which is good for the flagship. So when you combine this cooldown reduction with the Silencer cooldown reduction, you can get an item that has a very high crit chance and a very low cooldown and can just absolutely slash someone to ribbons in 3 seconds flat. After the most recent patch, I moved Submersible out of Nothing Better and kind of swapped it out with Submarine. The main thing here is that we can get this down to 3 seconds. It does decent damage. It has the same kind of effect as old Submarine for half the package. And if we've got a Crow's Nest sitting out there, or some other large item, but mostly a Crow's Nest, this is actually a perfectly fine one-weapon build item. The fact that it's essentially 3 seconds if you can meet the large item condition, and the fact that it double dips with Swashbuckle, and the fact that it's essentially 3 seconds as opposed to the 4-second Submarine, and it's smaller, actually makes this a pretty reasonable item. You know, and it's got a fair amount of good options for enchantments. I think just about everything here. You probably don't want Restorative or Shielded. Restorative's not terrible, but I think Shielded is probably the weakest. But everything else, you know, I'd be reasonably happy with. Main thing you need on Submersible, similar to Cutlass, and why it's not so high on the list, is it needs a way to scale its damage. So it's not unreasonable. You might be sitting a sharpening steel on this so that its damage increases as it goes. Otherwise, it's just not quite enough damage to justify what you're doing with it. But that being said, it's still really strong. Still really strong. Next up is Sniper Rifle. If you've never done a Sniper Rifle build, I really recommend you try it. It's fun and it's good. One weapon Sniper Rifle can be very strong, and you don't have to build around, you don't need Crow's Nest necessarily, but Crow's Nest is a good way to do it. Decent enchantment target. It's not as good as some, like the fact that this has the same impact as Submersible, but this fires 1/3 of the time, makes no sense, right? That means that like the enchantments haven't been really thoughtfully balanced. But the big thing here is that because it deals 3, 5, and 10 times more damage, that means that all weapon damage increases are 10 times more effective on this item. And so things like the Sharpening Stone get a lot more effective. Any scaling that you have becomes really, really strong. And you can see these things for critting for 10,000 damage on day 8, 9, 10 in a good run. Sniper is definitely not bad. When you get the chance to take a silver sniper rifle early in the fight, try a build around on it. You'll be probably pretty pleasantly surprised. Really fun item, really strong, and scales really nicely, especially with the silencer. All right, that covers the one weapon build. We've moved through all the builds so far. Let's move into the situationally OP category. This category is probably the most complex of all the ones that I'm going to share, and these items fit into these builds in situations, all right? Or they are build around, like you can just like kind of go off the map and build around these items alone in some situations. And so let's go ahead and talk about them. Oh, whoops, I didn't do that right. One sec. Okay, holsters. Hopefully I didn't get off pace here. Holsters, really great item. It's the top item of the situationally OP here. At the start of your fight, your small items gain haste for 1, 2, 3 seconds. This item becomes really, really strong in the situation where you're kind of filling your board with small weapons or small high impact items. Starting off the fight with 2 to 4 seconds of haste is really, really, really strong. And gives you that ability to kind of claw under, their first cooldowns and, get them really low really quickly, and then maybe tick them out with poison or something if they're a high shielding item or high shielding build. It is a decent enchantment target because it has start of fight effects with heavy icy. Turbo's very good on this, as long as you're not like inundated with haste. Doubling this to 6 seconds of haste is actually legit. This is one of the few times where, doubling down on an effect is actually very strong. The deadly is pretty good, and that's kind of where you're looking at. You kind of get like maybe 4 out of 10 that are quite strong. The toxic and fiery can be good if you have like some synergy with those effects, but generally not too strong. These numbers are just a little too low. Yeah. Especially considering how these enchantments work with other items. So, yep, holsters, situationally OP when you've got a full board of small items that you're trying to rush down the opponent with, usually small weapons. Clamor is a great item that fits into the aquatic build. It can fit into one weapon builds. You can even throw this in ammo and slow builds, but it is situationally OP when you are able to stack its slow with things like makeshift barricade and improvised bludgeon here, or if you can get an amber. Amber is the Mac item that adds 1 slow to all other things. If you can do that, then starting the fight slowing 4 items for 3 seconds is literally insanely strong. The heavy enchantment on this is very good. Other than that, maybe shiny is pretty good or radiant is pretty good, but other than that, you're kind of looking at maybe 3 out of 10 enchants are very positive for this. Heavy's a really good one though, because that makes any increase to slow just twice as effective. Super cool item when it's got those builds, and in the games where I've got a Clamora that's slowing for 3 seconds at the start of the fight, and it's like gold or diamond, man, you can feel the difference that makes at the start of the fight. Very good against one weapon builds as long as they don't have radiant, very powerful, very situationally OP. Next up, we've got Life Preserver. Life Preserver is situationally OP in the early game. Once you have over 2,000 health, this starts to be less and less effective. The cooldown's pretty high, and the shielding it gives you is kind of meh. I'd love to see this get rebalanced where it's shielding like 30 at level, like really just double down on its ability to be a super strong early game item. And then like scale, I could even see it scaling a little higher than this just because it falls off pretty hard later. But this can like almost single-handedly carry you, like a silver version of this can carry you through the first like 4 days, because you just have so much more health than your opponent. Not the best enchantment target, nothing special there. You know, it would be interesting if this dealt damage equal to its like health or something, but that is heal. You know, never mind. That's a terrible idea. Eject. But only really good in the early game, but very good in the early game. In a similar vein, we've got Barrel, not quite as black and white as the Life Preserver. This can sometimes scale into the late game a little bit, but this is really strong in the early game. Basically, you can get this up to silver pretty quickly early in the game, and then with its pretty low cooldown, and you just throw 2 non-adjacent fast using items next to it, this can really shield for quite a lot. Nothing special as far as the enchantment targets. Obsidian can probably something you could build around. You know, you could probably build around it with toxic or fiery, but in the late game, it just doesn't scale quite enough or quickly enough. It really needs a lot of triggers, and because late game fights tend to be over too quickly, and there's not a good way to scale this super fast, Barrel tends to kind of fall off. It can make its way into the mid game a lot better than Life Preserver can, but even still, just really OP in the early game. Next up, we've got Honing Steel. Honing Steel is a low cooldown tool item for Vanessa. Obviously, it's for Vanessa. The weapon to the right of this gains 8, 12, 16 shield for the fight, or 16 damage for the fight. And this is a really strong item in the early game, and then it falls off really hard later. The problem is it just doesn't add enough damage because fights tend to be over too quickly, very similar to the way we just talked about with Barrel, but in the early game, this does really good. It's not the best enchant target. We've got a little bit of bespoke enchant targeting with like the Deadly here, which is kind of interesting. Shiny could be interesting. Other than that, just really nothing special to be doing, but a bronze or silver one of these in the early game really can make or break what you're doing in the early game. All right, next up we've got Hand Axe here. Hand Axe fits in kind of this section here of things that are overpowered in the early game, but then they fall off. Hand Axe is just a lot of damage to add up on a bunch of junk on your board. You know, a silver Hand Axe here is adding 15 plus 9, which is 24 damage by itself every 8 seconds, which is a decent amount of damage per second, and then 9 damage per second on every single weapon that you have on the board. Actually ends up to be adding to quite a lot. You know, if you've got kind of like a shark claws and a katana and a bayonet and, you know, this Hand Axe and maybe, you know, a pistol or a revolver here, you know, this ends up actually adding a significant amount of damage in the early game, which ends up really mattering. This does have some kind of unique sort of bespoke enchantments. That being said, they're not very strong. You know, like the restorative, shielded, toxic, and fiery end up like adding poison and shield and stuff to your other items. Just not quite enough to be worth enchanting this item, and it has a real hard time staying on your board. I think one cool way to help this item be a little stronger and to have some staying power would be to buff those enchantments. So like if you enchant it, it has a place, but as it stands, very strong early, and then not very strong later. Next up is one of my favorite items, Rowboat. Rowboat, if you can meet the condition of having 5 or more unique types, which includes itself, so this already has Aquatic and Vehicle, so it really says if you have 3 or more unique types among your other items, reduce this to 4.5 seconds cooldown, and then every 4.5 seconds it charges adjacent items 1, 2, or 3 seconds. This item can fit in quite a lot of builds. Sometimes this item fits into your one weapon build and is charging every 4.5 seconds, and that really does add up to be a lot of damage. You can have it in an Aquatic build, or you can have it with like a boulder here or a slumbering primordial. You know, this item is pretty flexible, has a pretty powerful effect. It has some decent enchantments, nothing super strong. Like Turbo's pretty good, Heavy's pretty good here, but you know, these toxic and fieries are laughably low considering what you can get on a weapon for these types of things, as well as the obsidian. You know, these just don't do enough for the requirement, because if I have 5 unique types, this is just says shield 50, which is silly, you know. But that being said, really cool item. Situationally can be incredibly powerful. The main thing you're thinking about is like, you need this on an item that is actually going to benefit from the charge. And so like if this is 4.5 seconds and then your main item's 5 seconds cooldown, well, you end up only getting a 0.5 second charge because charge doesn't actually overflow into the next use of the item. So for that reason, it can be a little limiting. Because you need the unique types, it can be a little limiting. Although I do not think that that limitation is very difficult to achieve. I think there's a case to be made that Rowboat moves from situationally OP into usually good, just because I don't think it's difficult to meet its condition. But I do think it's difficult to get extreme value out of the charge effect all the time. And so that's why it's here in the situationally OP, because when you can get that effect, it's huge, huge. Next up is another one of my favorites, Harpoon. Harpoon is a nice bronze item that goes down and cooldown every time you upgrade it. It is 1 ammo and destroys a small item, and has pretty good enchantments. The heavy, turbo, icy are all pretty good. Shiny's really, really good. The rest of them are pretty mid. So I'd say it's about an average enchant target. The big reason that this item can be extremely strong is with love and attention, this item can be a absolute juggernaut in the late game. You know, it obviously has a bad matchup against like Square Pygmalion, but the main thing that you want to be doing is abusing this cooldown reduction once it's at bronze. The trick here is that you can start reducing this thing's cooldown early in the fight, and or early in a run, and because all of those cooldown reductions are static amounts, once you lower its cooldown as you upgrade it more, it captures basically an increased cooldown amount. And so I've definitely seen this at, you know, 3.8 seconds once it gets to diamond, and then you haste it, and then if you can get maybe 1 or 2 gunpowders on it or give it some ammo some other way, you can end up, you know, destroying 3 small items in 6 seconds into a fight, and that is often a win. You know, by day 7, 8, 9, destroying an item is an incredibly powerful effect, and this one should not be underestimated. But it does need a little love, so it's not something you can just throw on the board at 6-second cooldown and expect to get a really good payoff. You kind of need it. To get its cooldown down, you kind of need to abuse the cooldown reduction on it, and you need to give it some ammo. So for that reason, situationally OP, but when it shines, it really shines. Don't underestimate it. Next up is the Boulder. The Boulder is super cool and fun. It goes from 20 seconds to 16 seconds cooldown when it levels up, 1 ammo, and it deals damage equal to your enemy's max health. The real goal here is you're kind of doing the same things you do with a 1-weapon build. Rowboat ends up being really powerful with this item. Your goal is to get this off as soon as you can, and your main objective is to get this thing to crit, because then for them to actually live through the Boulder, they need to live through double their max health. That means they need to shield more than that to actually survive the Boulder, and that can be relatively difficult. So this does have some really good enchantments. Icy on it can be really strong if you can get the cooldown low enough. Turbo can be really strong. Some of the things you're looking for are ways to haste this item. You need to haste it and charge it. So putting haste on stuff is kind of one of the best ways to do this. Dive weights is really strong with this item. Obviously, stuff like Star Chart and Swashbuckle get really, really good. We've talked about Rowboat, and oh yeah, Captain's Wheel is really, really good here. So that's kind of what you're looking to do. And there's some situations where, you know, day 5 or 6, you get a gold boulder. You've got the money for it, and you've got maybe a, you know, silver or gold silencer. It's like, let's try it, you know. Obsidian can be really, really strong. Really great enchant target. Just about everything you can get. I would say Radiant's probably the worst one, but everything else is literally very, very strong. Maybe Restorative's pretty weak too, but even in those cases, that's actually not too bad because it's pretty much a full heal, or it's essentially doubling your effective HP with the shield, which means if you can get another ammo on this, or if you got some way to actually, you know, do it again, then it can often help you survive until that next you know, the next usage of the boulder. So great item. Situationally OP, needs a little love, but when it shines, it really does. Next up, we've got Long John or Langxian, or Longjong, I think is the correct pronunciation, but everyone calls it Long John. This is a situationally OP item. The situation that makes it OP is when you get this early and you really ride it all the way through the game. This item can carry you to 10 wins, perfect 10 wins when you get it on day one. And you really ideally want it as a starting item if you can, because you want to capture that first bonus damage from the free fight right at the start of the game. And then you want to take kind of every fight that you can. So the more times you fight, the more powerful Long John's going to be. It has decent enchantments. It scales very well. You need to get this leveled up as soon as possible. So getting this to silver at day one is very, very good. But you need to win your early fights. The big thing here is if I've got Long John and I lose like 2 player fights in a row, I'm probably going to switch out of Long John because I'm no longer meeting the situation in which it's OP. You really have to keep winning. And the second you start losing, you should be pivoting. The next 2 items, lighter, as well as volcanic vents. Both are situationally OP for the same reason. You really need some kind of like high value burn skill for these to be effective, because burn is so binary in the sense that once you meet a threshold where you're scaling burn is amazing. But up until then, burn is mid, if not extremely weak. You know, these items can be extremely strong if you can get an early, like, Final Flame, which is the +3 to your rightmost burn item, +3 burn. That kind of stuff really cranks these up, you know, and makes them really good. But if you don't have those, these are terrible. These are in the avoid category. You know, I mean, look at, like, Lighter's base effect is absolutely just silly how bad it is. Burn 1 every 3 seconds. It is nice that this is a cooldown of 3 seconds. This got missed by the Great Bonkening. Not a very good, I mean, it's a fine, no, it's actually kind of a bad enchant target. Let's Vents. Volcanic Vents is a little bit more interesting as a enchant target. These heavy, icy, and turbos get pretty good. The shiny's mid. The deadly's okay. So these are just situationally OP in which you have this the skills to actually support them, but they have to have skills to work. Next up, we've got Slumbering Primordial. Now, I haven't actually got to play with this item yet, but I have lost to it once. The idea here is it's just a build-around item. It works well with your Primordial Depth Charge. It works well with kind of your Aquatic synergies where you're poisoning, freezing, burning, you know, those kind of things tend to be really strong. It's got that most notable synergy with Primordial Death Charge. So this Primordial Depth Charge goes off here, triggers a bunch of freeze, burn, and poison. That buffs this up, charges it up, does a bunch of damage. You know, very straightforward. It's got good enchantments. It's, you know, synergist. It's similar to the Bowler. It's difficult to get. You need a very specific set of items for this to work. But when it works, it's strong. I think it's pretty well positioned. It doesn't feel like an OP item to me, but that may change the more I play with it. Incredibly good enchant target. Pretty much everything on here is great except for probably Radiant. Radiance tends not to be very good on large items because they tend not to get like frozen as much or destroyed very much. I mean, it does keep them from being slowed though, so it's not terrible, don't get me wrong, but Radiant tends to be better on your smaller items. So yep, Slumbering Primordial, not much to say. Next up, we've got one of the coolest items for Vanessa is Weatherglass. If you have another item with Burn, Poison, Slow, or Freeze, this gets +1 multicast for each. So this is a total build-around item. It tends to have pretty good enchantments on average. It really needs, you know, like either Burn or Poison scaling. It needs an entire board to build around it, and it's a pretty low cooldown. The item is generally on the weaker side, but it can pop off, and it actually synergizes very well with stuff like this Powder Keg, which we'll look at, and, you know, items that slow end up being pretty good with this, so you'll end up like having like dock lines, as well as like, you know, maybe a Captain's Wheel and a Catfish, This can get thrown in with like a pufferfish sometimes if you like have turbo on this. That's one of the ways that this gets really good. Sick Burn is one of the best. Like this thing ends up being extremely strong for the Weatherglass build. It's like the Weatherglass enabler. But you know, if you don't have that, Weatherglass is hard to get off the ground. There's a case to be made that this goes into nothing better. But because every once in a while you really do get a really strong Weatherglass build, I think it's worth putting in Situationally OP. Next up is Powder Keg, one of my favorite items. This is sort of a burn payoff for Vanessa. It deals 30, 40, 50% of your enemy's max health. It's a good enchantment target with like actually decent shield and restorative effects. Pretty much all of these are extremely good, with a notable call out that Radiant's probably one of the best ones because it can't destroy itself. So then it can trigger multiple times in a fight. Obsidian is also absolutely nuts. Toxic and Fiery, very, very good. Shiny's very, very good. Really strong situational item when you can justify all the burn on the board and when you can ensure that they're going to die from this attack, which usually means you need crit. You need this to crit for it to really reach its maximal impact, or it needs Radiant, something like that, for it to be particularly powerful. So situationally, OP is the Powder Keg. Shovel was one that I discussed a lot on the Discord because it's one that I feel should be at the top of nothing better, but I was convinced that there is a case where Shovel is great, and pretty much all of the time Shovel's really bad, and so that makes me feel it's like situationally OP. I think Shovel's kind of the best when you get it on day 1 or day 2 as a bronze item, and then you get a free upgrade to silver, because then you capture the sort of income without actually spending the money. You know, the big problem here is like an 8 gold silver shovel will take 5 days if you sell the item it generates to actually make you money, and that's super slow value, right? I mean, that is just not a lot of value. But if you can get it for $4 early in the game and then use no money to upgrade it to silver, you know, sometimes you get an item that really matters. You know, you get stuff you can put on your board as you're leveling up early. It does enough damage in the early game. You know, this is 5 damage per second, which isn't terrible. You know, this is 10 damage per second. But by the time it's gold, it's going to be off your board. And every once in a while, it gives you a totally broken item that fits really well and something you can build around because you wouldn't normally be able to get it. And for that reason, I think it's situationally OP. It's not something you should be going for all the time. It is fun with a capital F, but that doesn't make it good with a capital G. All right, we've moved out of situationally OP into the usually good territory. These items are items you can almost always take because you're probably going to get a use out of them. Even when I don't have a single slow item or a single item I need to crit on my board, I will often see these items and consider if they're worth taking. So first up here is gunpowder. We have a lot of items like, you know, we've got dive weights down here. We've got harpoon up here. We've got, what else? All these other ammo items like grenades that we could throw on our board. Throwing knives, which really benefits from extra gunpowder. Things like cannon and torpedo and arbalist, all really, really massively positively impacted by having more ammo. And that makes gunpowder just really good on average for Vanessa. More than any other character, gunpowder just is something that you want to see. You know, every time I see a gunpowder on Vanessa, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's going to be so useful probably. I wonder what I'll be able to put that on. That is probably going to impact my run. Every single time I see gunpowder, that feels like it's the case. So don't pass these up, and if you're sitting on one, just sit on it. You never know when it's going to be useful. Next up here is Eagle Talisman on the usually good. Crit is such a powerful tool in Vanessa's board because you have stuff like Sextant, because you have stuff like Cutlass, which doubles its crit damage, as well as Piranha, you know, and because you're doing a lot of poison and burn. You know, you just have a lot of ways that crit is going to matter a lot. And Eagle Talisman is a very efficient way to apply critical damage or critical chance to an item for a very low cost. And it's one of the better things you can get from the loot. Luckily, most loot in this game is very good, but crit tends to be quite good for Vanessa specifically, because there's a lot of synergy around crit. It's not as good as some other characters, like, you know, Pygmalion. Getting these Eagle Talismans tends to be even stronger because he doesn't have access to the crit. So, you know, I would say those are more like in the always good for someone like Pygmalion. I don't know Dooley as well, so I can't speak to Dooley. But Vanessa just has a lot of synergy around crit. But sometimes you get to a point where you just don't need any more crit, you know, and so this ends up not being as useful. So I would just say that's why it's usually good, not always good. Next up, we've got Vanessa's Amulet, an apparel item that just gives you a nice solid crit damage across the board for all of your items that can crit. At Diamond, this is a really strong item considering its footprint on your board, and it has some interesting kind of bespoke enchantments. The deadly effect here is really good. Radiance fine because it means it can't be destroyed, which is actually not too bad. And then the heavy icy turbo, all are quite good because they're based on when you crit. And if you have a full board of items that are critting, that ends up being really strong. You'll get a lot of triggers for this. This used to do stuff like at the start of fight, and now it's a much better enchantment target now. I'd like to see a little bit buff to this obsidian one that's a little weak. You know, like maybe increased damage every time you crit, even if it was a small amount, like 2 or 3. That being said, can pretty much fit on every board. I would say there's above a 10% chance that this is on my board at the end of the game, which is pretty strong considering you know, you often get items edged out that are just doing like a generic thing based on like needing to build specifically for synergy. But, you know, Vanessa's Amulet just has some staying power. It's really good in the early and the mid game, especially if you can get it up like just a silver 20% chance across the board is great. And it's great for a long time. So, yep, Vanessa's Amulet. Next up is our Lord and Savior Dock Lines. This used to be way more powerful at 4 seconds, and it was, you know, I would say disproportionately impacted by the Great Bonkening. I think I've talked about that already a little earlier. Not the best shield, not the best enchantment target. I would generally not do any of these enchantments. They're very bad considering the amount that this triggers. And the amount of payoff that you get. That being said, its base effect is extremely strong. You know, slowing 4 items for 3 seconds, assuming you don't get any ways to increase that slow, is nuts. And so Dock Lines can pretty much fit in every build. It is a tool. It is aquatic. It does slow. And those things make it quite good. It's very good at silver. It's extremely good at gold, and then extremely good at diamond. So it plays quite well even in silver. So don't skip it. Or should I say, don't dock it. Next up, we've got, well, one of the best Vanessa items out there, Sextant. This is a really powerful haste trigger that can fit in aquatic, it can fit in the slow build, it can fit in the ammo build, it can fit in the one weapon build, fits in everything. This gives a crit adjacency, and then anytime you crit on any item, this hastes something. You know, the last run that I did, I had a Sextant that I had increased to 6 seconds with 3 rocket boots. So anytime anything crit, I would get a 6-second haste effect. It's a pretty good enchant target with this sort of when you crit deal damage, giving extra crit, the shiny effect here. Even getting like these heal and shields can be pretty good. The slow one is probably one of the best ones that you can get for the Sextant because you're slowing them as much as you're hasting yourself, and that's a really powerful effect. Super good item, can fit into almost everything. Don't skip it. In a similar vein, this one, it does have some requirements. You need a large item or vehicle, but that's pretty easy to do on Vanessa. And when you do it, you get an incredibly strong payoff here with the Captain's Wheel. Captain's Wheel is just a great haste generator, very powerful, every 2.5 seconds, so it triggers very quickly. It's not a very good enchant target, but getting some, once you get haste on the Captain's Wheel is when this item gets to become insane because it triggers every 2.25 seconds and is hasting items adjacent to it for a lot. So great item, can fit pretty much in any build, and really can find a powerful place. Does it end up on my board at the end all the time? No. But is it on my board at some point if I find one? Yes, pretty much always. Another item that just slots into pretty much every build is tripwire here, especially at diamond tier. You can just throw this on your board. Tends to be pretty good enchant targets. Shiny, heavy, turbo, icy. Obsidian is interesting because it turns it into a caltrops. Maybe even fiery or toxic here could work depending on the situation. But the big thing is it just slows them down. And for builds that really require a lot of triggers of stuff, just throwing a tripwire in the mix can be a very good meta play. It's like Dooley's really strong, and really just gums up the works for them, and keeps them from sort of comboing off of each other, and can break charge loops, that kind of thing. And it has a much smaller footprint than something like Iceberg does, for good effect. The big thing that Tripwire doesn't have is that it has like no tags. So that's one of the reasons, like, I think Tripwire would be a little bit higher if it had some useful tags, but currently has none. One of the best Vanessa items is Pet Rock here, in a similar vein with Vanessa's Amulet. This just says if it's your only friend, everything gains crit chance, and then it does a little bit of damage with a 6-second cooldown small item attack. This doesn't have the best options as far as enchantments. Really, like Deadly is the only one that's like really good, and maybe Deadly and Radiant are the only ones that are really good. Everything else is super mid, right? Really, really nothing exciting. But this secondary effect here, even at silver or gold or bronze, is just very powerful. You get a little bit of damage per sec. You get to get more crit on kind of all your items, and this sometimes make a really big difference when you need that crit synergy. Can be very powerful. So Pet Rock fits in almost every build. Don't miss it, but make sure that it doesn't work as well in the Aquatic build because there's so many friends. So just keep that one in mind. Next up is Super Syrup. This comes from the Lick It encounter, and because Vanessa wants crit so badly, and the earlier you get it, the better. Super Syrup tends to be very, very strong, especially in the current meta where it's very easy to upgrade from bronze to silver. Getting this at bronze, using it like halfway or 75%, then upgrading it and refreshing all the ammo means that you can get 25 crit out of this item for a very low cost, relatively speaking. 25 crit on 2 items, and that really, really matters. If you've got like an early cutlass or an early double barrel or even like a early sniper rifle, this item is just nuts and super helpful, and something you should not pass up. Much better than the other 2 things for Lick It. Next up, we've got the neutral item Shadowed Cloak. I did forget to call out that Simple Syrup is a neutral item as well. This is on a lot of enemies. An extremely strong item for Vanessa, not just because of one weapon builds, but for ammo builds it can fit into. You can throw this on next to a ballista, and then it will scale the ballista based on every time that weapon is used. It is a nice haste activator. I often find myself, putting a silver Shadowed Cloak next to a catfish, and then the catfish almost is just constantly ramping its poison damage and then firing basically twice as fast as it normally would. That in the early game tends to be really strong. Fits in a lot of builds. It does everything that Vanessa needs, which is like scaling weapons and triggering haste. And has some decent enchantment targets. Mostly the heavy, I think, is kind of the best one, heavy and icy. So that's actually it's like kind of below average as an enchantment target. And you really never want turbo because you'll end up over hasting. Even at silver or gold, this tends to haste more than you need. So cool item, great for Vanessa. Pretty much always worth it to see a bronze one if you see it in the Curio's workshop. Next up, we've got Figurehead. Very cool item. Very well balanced item because it fits kind of into everything. For Aquatic builds, it gives a really powerful cooldown reduction. For 2 spaces on the board, giving 30% cooldown reduction to everything else on the board turns out to be a good cost to benefit analysis. And then sometimes on like an ammo build or even a 1 weapon build, you just need some flat damage, like on that cutlass or on a sniper rifle. Plus 100 damage is plus 1,000 damage to a diamond sniper rifle, right? And so that ends up actually mattering a lot, and ends up being quite powerful. It can have some decent enchantments, especially shiny. Deadly's pretty good. Heavy, icy, turbo, pretty good. Obsidian's not terrible. But be careful with obsidian because it does turn it into a weapon, I think. So all that being said, strong item in pretty much every build. Yeah, the tough thing is it doesn't fit very well with flagship, which is like kind of the one thing I dislike. Is that like for an item that looks like it's on a ship. Whoops, sorry about that. It actually doesn't synergize with flagship very well because it takes too much space and it doesn't give one of the like 4 tags that the flagship needs. So, you know, despite the fact that these look like they would naturally go together, they do not. All right, next up we've got improvised bludgeon as well as makeshift barricade. The reason these are strong is that when you sell your items, they gain slow. All right, so this one, when it scales up, gives more slow when it levels up. But I think improvised bludgeon is always 1. I think these are wrong. I think this got changed, but you know, test for yourself. I don't think that this actually increases. I think it's always +1 slow, but I could be wrong about that. Either way, Vanessa has a lot of access to slow, and some of her best universal items like Clamora, dock lines, tripwire are all based on slow. So increasing the slow amount that you do is just a natural fit for Vanessa. Very powerful. These items I'll often pick up from Curio and just let them sit, because even if I get a slow enchantment on something, or if I end up wanting to put eels in play, or even something as simple as Illusoray, right, over here, which isn't that strong, these significantly increase the effectiveness of those items and are something that you should keep an eye out for. All right, and now we are finally moving into the top category here, the always good items for Vanessa. And the first one we have here is Wanted Poster. The reason this is so good is it's passive. When you win a fight against a player, gain 1, 2, or 3 XP. If you have Wanted Poster in play, gain 1 additional. The extra EXP you get from Wanted Poster is absolutely nuts. If you need to in a pinch, you can throw it on your board if you just don't have a lot of items, which is fine. Not a best enchantment target. These like fall below half health tend not to be good. Like, why would I want to do 120 damage when I fall below half health? Are you joking? That's trash. But this effect here is literally nuts. Never skip it. If you can afford it, keep it and only sell it if you absolutely have to. If you find the thing that's going to complete your build, because every experience you get off of this is just absolute gravy on top of what you're doing. Amazing item. Don't dock it. Doesn't need to be on your board, but if you can put it on your board and get that extra experience and you can utilize the crit, that's also very good. So I love that it has the flexibility there. Next up, we've got Insect Wing and Feather. Basically, Vanessa, more than other characters, really benefits from hitting hard and fast, and she's got a lot of charge effects. So we've got Pufferfish, we've got Lighthouse, Dark Water Anglerfish. What else do we have? We've got Trebuchet, we've got Primordial, and Powder Keg. All of these tend to be benefited by meeting certain thresholds with their cooldown amount. Even Cannonade here, if this ever gets buffed, this will also be part of one. And so getting items into their cooldown thresholds really makes a huge difference. Oh, also Turtle Shell here. Getting a Pufferfish starts, what is Pufferfish's first? I think I just changed it. So it starts at 10 and then goes down to 8. But getting this to a 6.6 seconds makes this item amazing. Getting this to 8.8 seconds is amazing, because that means that every 4 times you trigger haste at 8.8 seconds, this guarantees full charges, assuming it's not hasted itself. And those thresholds are what you want to be meeting. Getting Insect Wings and Feathers is what lets you do that, and that's why they're especially strong. They're really strong in everyone, probably the strongest loot, maybe a little overpowered, but even if they are nerfed, they are still going to be some of the best things that you can get for Vanessa, because she needs to go fast, she needs to get to charge thresholds in the same way these things are really good for dueling. Next up, we've got Rocket Boots. Currently, I think Vanessa has the most access to haste of the 3 characters that are out, and that makes Rocket Boots really good. Now, Rocket Boots are really good on someone like Pygmalion for the opposite reason, because he has no access to haste. You know, getting a Rocket Boots on the board can sometimes be insanely strong. But for Vanessa, this is all about the selling effect, increasing the haste of a captain's wheel or a sextant, or even sometimes a shadowed cloak, or a water wheel, or a beach ball. All those really, really, really impactful, and that makes Rocket Boots one of the best things you could pick up on Vanessa, because adding 1 haste duration to some of these items tends to be like everything. Tends to make like literally a world of difference as far as your ability to actually win fights. Next up here we've got Cove, and Cove is pretty much always good. It's so good when you buy it that it's actually not always good, but it is so good that we're going to put it in always good anyway. The big thing here is you pretty much never want to buy Cove when it's gold or diamond, unless you're like pretty much actually never. Yeah, never, because it's not worth it. But at bronze or silver, if I don't have a Cove and I have some money, I'm going to pick it up, because it's almost always a net positive as far as my economy is concerned. And that's what you want. A bronze Cove is one of the best items in the game for Vanessa, because she does not have a huge amount of access to improving her economy. This item really is necessary, and I mean necessary, and it's accessible. You know, if you a shielded vendor early, you're going to see a Cove. This is just a way to really get your economy going. I sometimes sell these things on day 6 for like 60 gold. And that influx of money at that point in the run, when like all the gold items are starting to appear, is invaluable, and one of the reasons that I'm successful. You can also build around Cove if you get it early enough. I think this was disproportionately affected by the Great Bonkening, because it's 30% less effective, because it went from 3 seconds to 4 seconds, and I kind of think it needs to be at 3 seconds for it to be good. It would also be cool if this value was at like gold you started getting 2. I think those would make this item a little bit better of a build around item. That being said, hard to complain about one of the best items in the game. It's just hard to build around it on your board, but it is amazing to keep in your stash and not put on your board. Last but not least, we have Tropical Island. I originally had Tropical Island in the usually good category because it's expensive, but the reality is the amount of regen and health that this gives you at gold and at diamond, because it generates a coconut or citrus at every hour, and if you have a Cove, that's stacking with the Cove as well, you know, like giving your Cove money, that kind of stuff. This item tends to be incredibly strong. I have only ever done a single build where it was on my board. It doesn't really, like, this amount of regen isn't worth the payoff that is required. It has a pretty decent enchant target, because it's like when you slow haste, at the start of the fight, slow, you know, these actually tend to be like okay, or like when you slow, deal 30 damage, it turns it into a proboscis. So it's actually got some kind of unique enchantments when you think about it. But you know, that being said, the main reason this thing is always good is because of this. At the start of each hour, get a coconut or citrus. It's going to be gold coconuts. It's going to be diamond coconuts. And if you can get that early, like on day 5 or 6, I mean, that is just a huge amount of regen and health by the time you hit like day 12. You know, that adds up to an incredible amount of slow and steady increases. So yeah, that covers the Vanessa tier list. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you found that valuable. Feel free to take a look at some of the other videos I make. Mostly I just do like over-explain uncut runs where I really go through kind of the details of what I'm doing when I'm playing my game. I used to do some small form content where I would kind of show endgame builds, which I think is valuable, but people didn't seem to watch it, in the sense that it didn't seem that it was as valuable as I thought it would be. If you want to see some of that, let me know and I can make more of those. But only if it's useful. It's really not worth it for me to make it if it's not useful, because that's pretty much why I make this stuff. As you know, if you're new to the channel, you won't know this, but this is an unmonetized channel. I don't make any money off of this stuff. I don't have a Patreon. I just make this stuff because I like making, I like helping, really. I like helping people understand the games that I love, maybe for the reasons that I love them. And that's my main motivation for making this stuff. So hopefully you found this useful. And I will see you in the next one. As Vanessa gets updates, I will send out updated tier lists. So until next time.